Great. Good morning, everyone. Thank you
Just a
all for.
moment. Sorry, this is the moderator.
Oh,
Didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm going to hit the record button, but first doing a quick mic check with Holly Matterson. Good morning. I promoted you. We'll do a quick mic check. And Holly, you've been promoted. We'll do a quick mic check. Going once, going twice. I'm going to hit the record button and back to you. I apologize for the interruption.
Oh, no problem at all.
This meeting is being recorded.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for coming to our special meeting. I know it's hard to carve away extra time with such short notice, so I really appreciate it. And thank you to our interviewees for making time today as well. I think first we have to call roll and establish a quorum.
Dr. Solcito?
Present.
Ms. Bullard?
Here.
Dr. Grant?
Here.
Ms. Laredo?
Here.
Dr. Noland?
Here.
Ms. Ferber?
Here.
Dr. Bradbury?
Here.
And Ms. Prado is absent today, and we have a quorum.
Great. Thank you, Jessica. Okay, so next item on the agenda is public comment on items not on the agenda. Moderator, would you open that up to the public, please?
Yes, this is the moderator. The Q&A is now open. The instructions are on the screen for your reference. If you're logged in and would like to participate, you can do so in two ways. Click the question mark inside of the square, type comment, and send it to all panelists. Or you can raise your hand by pressing the hand raise button on the command row, typically bottom center of your screen. If you called in from your phone only, you can press *3 to raise your hand. I do see Cherries is raising hand. I'm going to send a request to unmute your microphone. I have a timer here for 2 minutes, and I'll give you a 15-second warning.
And moderator, before we start that, I should have mentioned for public comments, these are just for items that are not on the agenda. If you are here to comment on any of the items that are on our agenda, please wait until those items are being discussed. Also, just so that everyone is aware, we're not, we don't comment back about public comments. So if you're making a comment, we appreciate it, but just be aware that we're not going to be discussing anything further in this meeting on the comments that are not on the agenda. Thanks.
I've sent a request to mute your microphone. And you're unmuted.
Okay, thank you so much. Good morning, Veterinary Medical Board. My name is Charis Fifield, and I'm a representative for the Pet Cannabis Coalition. The Pet Cannabis Coalition led the effort to pass AB 1885, and we are sharing our recommendations for the regulatory process. We strongly advocate for the involvement of veterinarians in this process of implementing and regulating this bill. Therefore, we propose the following recommendations regarding the implementation and regulatory aspects of AB 1885. We emphasize the importance of aligning the limit of THC in cannabis products intended for animal consumption with the limits already established for human cannabis products, as stipulated by existing law. Pets come in various sizes, and setting the THC limits for cannabis products intended for pets could diminish therapeutic value for such products for larger animals. We advise against mandating additional training for veterinarians to recommend cannabis. Determining the educational requirements for veterinarians should be the responsibility of veterinarians themselves and the Veterinary Medical Board. This viewpoint aligns with the stance of the California Veterinary Medical Association. Third, our veterinary colleagues in Mexico and Colombia have been actively using cannabis in practice and have found benefits for a number of conditions. across a wide range of species, including mammals, avians, amphibians, and reptiles. In California, and more generally in the US, we as a profession are falling behind in understanding the endocannabinoid system and utilizing cannabis as a tool which can improve the lives of countless animals across the state. We firmly, is that time?
15 seconds.
Oh, sorry. We firmly believe that implementing the aforementioned recommendations will safeguard the welfare of animals benefiting from cannabis products and also protect the interests of veterinarians and the veterinary medicine industry. Thank you for your consideration of this important matter.
The moderator, no further requests have been submitted. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, please. Okay, we would be moving on to our interviews, which is why we started this meeting in the first place. So we have two very good candidates. Let me just pull this up here. We have Dr. Colleen Tansey Baldwin and Dr. Cheryl Waterhouse interviewing today. I think we're going to go just in alphabetical order. So we will start with Dr. Baldwin, and all of the board members, you should have the updated MDC questions in your email. So if you have that open, I'm hoping you all have gotten that. I know that they've all been emailed, but I just want to, I'm hoping everybody does have it. I can't see everyone's face. It's a little different having a meeting online. It's a little more challenging. I feel for you guys who've done this, who've led the meeting. So thank you for all your hard work, past presidents. So I think I'd like to go down the line for board members in, I guess, in alphabetical order, although I guess not that in front of me either. Let's start with, I'm maybe across the screen. Let me do my layout here, side by
Dr.
side.
If you look, if you look at the email, it just, I went in order of the agenda, or you could just look at the agenda and just read them that way.
In your MDC meeting email?
Yeah, or just the agenda. So if you look at the agenda, just go in the order of the members. That might be the easiest.
Oh, I see. Okay. Da-da-da. There they are. Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna maybe go last. So yeah, it's looking at. I'm glad I have multiple screens to look at. Again, my apologies. Okay, let's start with Dr. Solicito and go down the line. It'll be Dr. Solicito. I think we have 5. We have the meeting. Oh my goodness. I apologize. I did have multiple. Anyway, we'll start with Dr. Solicito and go down the line, and I'll go ahead and call the next person after each question.
Okay, let's get this started. Good morning, Dr. Baldwin. Let's start with your first question. Tell us about yourself and why you're applying to be a member of the multidisciplinary committee of the Veterinary Medical Board.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone, for allowing me to interview. My full name is Colleen Tansey Baldwin, but I go by Dr. Tansey. I sort of joke that I'm Dr. Tansey and Mrs. Baldwin, and I have 2 personalities, but it's a little bit of a joke there. But I've been a veterinarian for 15 years. This is actually my second career. I was in advertising before I went to veterinary school. I'm board certified in medical oncology. And I'm originally from Chicago, so I grew up in an Irish Italian Catholic household. So I have a love for California now that I hadn't realized that I would love in the past. After working in advertising and marketing for several years, truthfully, after 9/11 hit, it changed the way I looked at things and decided that, you know what, I I'm going to try to be a veterinarian. I'd always wanted to and never thought I was smart enough, but apparently I am. So went through veterinary school at 30, did my internship and residency. I've been married for 20 years to my husband. He just finished his PhD. So he supported me through vet school and I supported him through his PhD, and now we're living the dream. As far as, why I want to do this, I love being a clinician, but I actually really like people as well. I like talking to them. I like getting to know them. It's a gift to be able to see their connection with their pet, at least in small animal medicine. Additionally, I train a lot of students and interns and residents that this community is a very small community and we have to support one another. So being a veterinarian, we want to help animals, but along with every animal, there's a person attached to it, regardless of what discipline you're working in. I've always had a passion for animal welfare. Even as far back as when I was in vet school, I spent a summer in Washington, D.C. working with the Government Relations Division of the AVMA on the Hill to try to get more bills passed. So I do have this intrinsic sort of desire to be a civil servant, and I think it comes from my background with my dad being a police officer in Chicago for 48 years and my mom a nurse. So there is something about being able to help people and animals that I genuinely love. Hopefully that was helpful.
Thank you so much for that.
Great. Dr. Bowler.
Or not Dr. Bowler, but I wish I was.
I'm not flustered at all with this video stuff.
It's okay. You're doing great. Good morning, everybody. And good morning, Dr. Tansey. Thank you very much. Very interesting, amazing second career at 30 going to vet school. That's crazy. But congratulations. So to the best of your knowledge, what are the functions of a licensing board or committee and the laws governing veterinary medicine in California?
That is a great question. Having been a subject matter expert since 2017, I feel like I have a much better understanding of what the roles of a veterinarian in RVT and really just the support staff in the animal welfare environment and the requirements sort of needed to practice that best quality medicine. It seems that as I've been reviewing cases, most veterinarians and RVTs, so the veterinary community, we all want to do the right thing for the patient and for the animal. A lot of the challenges that I see come through with communication and lack thereof. Truthfully, I never realized the freedom that we would have as veterinarians, but also the extensive burden of becoming a veterinarian and trying to do the right thing for the patient and for the client. So in regard to the role of, the licensing board and MDC and veterinary medical board, this is a vast responsibility that you have taken on. But we as veterinarians really need to set ourselves apart and live up to the standards that I think the general public view us with. And it's important that we address some of the concerns, some of the challenges that are ever evolving as we've got new and different generations of veterinarians and really we've got 4 or 5 different generations of consumers that have animals. And that is a really challenging statistic in my mind to try to please everybody and address all of those potential issues through the Veterinary Medical Board and creating statutes and clarifications and guidance on how we should conduct ourselves day to day and how to help animals.
Thank you very much. Can I quickly, I know we have to move on, but what kind of turtle is behind you?
I have a red-eared slider named Lewis.
That's cool. I rescue red-eared sliders and I have a lot of big, huge honkers in ponds. So anyway.
I also have a giant Sulcata tortoise in my backyard. So
neat. Okay, cool. Sorry to diverge. Sorry, Dr. Bradbury.
No problem. Thank you. Okay, Dr. Grant, that's actually a doctor. Your question number 3, please.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thanks for taking the time. Dr. Tansey, what do you think is the MDC's relation to the Veterinary Medical Board, and what role do you hope to play if selected?
I'm sorry, could you repeat just the last part, the role of the MDC with the
What role
veterinary?
do you hope to play if you're selected?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think that the Veterinary Medical Board, again, has such a vast level of responsibility, and the MDC really trying to adjust, update, make recommendations on how do we keep animals safe, how do we protect consumers from the unlicensed practice of veterinary medicine, but also holding veterinarians and RVTs to the highest level of medicine that we can is really important. And so as far as the MDC is concerned, creating those or identifying the issues and creating some potential solutions and suggesting them to the members of the board is probably the simplest way of putting it, although it's much more complicated than that, I'm sure. As far as what my role would be, I know that I've had a sort of a non-traditional route to veterinary medicine, and being a clinician, I do work I work 3 days a week, and of course review the cases as an expert witness or subject matter expert. But I hope that I can bring a little bit of a different perspective in specialty medicine compared to, say, equine medicine or herd animal health. We all bring different levels of experience to the table, and just being able to communicate hopefully effectively and appropriately while standing up for what I believe in, while also listening to others' opinions is really sort of vital. And so hopefully I will be able to bring that to the table. You know, everybody's had some successes and failures, and I think it makes us better and stronger in the end.
Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Okay, Miss Laredo.
Hey, good morning, Dr. Tansey. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I have a great question for you.
Oh,
So
gosh.
the MDC meets quarterly before all board meetings, and aside from these quarterly half-day to full-day meetings, the members are typically assigned to serve several subcommittees, each of which can take an additional 2 to 6 hours per month at least. Given this information, can you commit to this expectation of time spent for the MDC and fulfill your role?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. You know, I probably one of my greatest strengths and weaknesses is that I have a lot of interests, and I think that would be a absolutely reasonable amount of time to commit, and just being able to participate and give back to the community would be great. So yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Noland.
Welcome, Dr. Tansey. Thank you for applying and for joining us.
Thank you.
I have the 5th question. Recommendations made by the MDC are based on its consumer protection mandate, which may be unpopular with the general profession. How do you plan to handle making decisions based on the needs of consumers and their pets, despite possible disapproval from colleagues?
Wow, that's a great question. Yeah, you know, I think the hesitancy, it comes from fear for most veterinarians. We've worked so hard to get to where we are, and the fear of losing everything that we've achieved is sort of terrifying, right? And so we're here because we want to help animals in whatever way we can. But again, every animal is attached to a person, and if you don't like people, you're not going to be a very successful veterinarian. So if we don't do what's right for the patient, and in turn do what's right for the community and the general public, then we're failing at what we've set out to do. Again, it's an interesting time in life. We're all kind of caught up with day-to-day life, personally and professionally, and I think sometimes we forget what our role is, and we're here to help animals in the community. And again, with so many different generations out there, it is hard to accurately communicate with everyone the same way. So if we can sort of support one another and say, this is what's best for the patient, keep your decision-making at the forefront for patient care, it would be hard for, I think, most veterinarians and professionals to argue with the decisions.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Sperber.
Good morning. So I have question number 6. As a veterinarian, we assume you are familiar with current trends in veterinary medicine, but which issues have affected you directly and would like the MDC to address?
Great question. Well, one of the issues that is already being addressed is the role of cannabis, CBD, THC in my tiny world of veterinary oncology. Holistic treatments, alternative treatments are really quite challenging to try to find actual scientific studies on it and be able to have those honest and open discussions with clients. If my client can't have a discussion with their veterinarian about CBD, but they can talk to the gentleman down at the dispensary, that I think makes it very difficult for all of us. And so having some sort of regulation and just knowing what our role is really is helpful. Telemedicine during COVID and now post-COVID, I think has created a lot of challenge and confusion for the general public and for veterinarians. So I know that that's being addressed as well. One of the challenges that I find is now with the new USP laws that kind of govern chemotherapy and the role of compounding drugs, that will be sort of interesting to see how that evolves within the MDC and the Veterinary Medical Board over time.
Thank you.
Great. Well, it is down to me. Thank you. So can you think of any position that you hold or activities you're currently involved in that may present a conflict of interest for you to serve as a member of the MDC and thus a representative of the VMB?
I don't, honestly. I do sit on an advisory board for the dean at the College of Veterinary Medicine at Western University, but that I would not represent a conflict of interest from my perspective. And it's nice to meet you, Dr. Bradbury. I know you by reputation, of course, so thank you.
Oh, that's very nice. Thank you. It's nice to see you too. I think we've been on calls together with the subject matter expert training. Thank you. And then Dr. Solicito, the last question.
Well, to wrap this up, is there anything else you would like to share with the board?
You know, I think the one thing that I try to remind myself of every day is something that a mentor once said to me: lead with integrity and don't let vengeance drive you. Those two things, I think, if I do that every day, I will succeed. And if whatever I can do to sort of give back to the community, give back to, sounds cheesy, but sort of the world and leave behind a good legacy, that's what I'd like to do. So thank you so much for your time. It's a privilege to be here, and it would be an honor to be on the MDC, and thank you for your consideration.
Well, Dr. Tansey, thank you so much for coming this morning. And it's also very nice to meet you virtually. And if you want to just stand by, we're going to have our interview with Dr. Waterhouse, and then we'll have some discussion and go from there. So thank you again very much. Okay, so let's get Dr. Waterhouse. Put you on my main screen here. Good morning, Dr. Waterhouse.
Good morning.
Great to see you again. So I think we're starting with Ms. Bowler with question number 1.
Good morning, Dr. Waterhouse.
Hello.
Hello. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're applying to be a member of the MDC of the VMB?
I became a veterinarian 42 years ago. I can't believe it's been that long, but I grew up on a farm in Iowa. I grew up on a horse, but I chose to practice small medicine for the last 42 years. I practiced in Iowa and then in Kansas and Missouri, but the last 30 years I practiced in Fresno, and I've loved it. It's been great for me. I started my own practice 28 years ago, And then 4 years ago, I sold the majority, not all of it, but the majority to a corporation. So I have experience as an associate. I have experience as a practice owner and as a corporate partner. I have experience in more rural areas and experience in suburban areas. So I've been on the VMB. I was on the VMB for 8 years, and I was on the MDC for between 2 to 3 years. So that's kind of my brief resume.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Grant.
Good morning, Dr. Waterhouse.
Good morning.
To the best of your knowledge, what are the functions of a licensing board / committee and the laws governing veterinary medicine in California?
The Veterinary Medical Board is in charge of licensing. They're in charge of discipline. They're in charge of working with the legislature to write statutes. They write regulations that have to go through the process. So there's lots of functions, and the MDC functions is kind of the sounding board. They're the committee that does all the hashing out and the wordsmithing. And so they're an important part of the whole process.
Thank you.
Okay, I have my camera turned off because I was having some trouble with the feed. So I'm just going to talk for right now. Ms. Laredo.
Good morning, Dr. Waterhouse. Good to see you.
You too.
So, what do you think is the MDC's relation to the Veterinary Medical Board, and what role do you hope to play if selected?
So the MDC is a very important part of the whole process, as I mentioned before. So the MDC receives assignments from the board as issues come up, and they're sent to the MDC. And the MDC is where everybody talks it out. They listen to all the stakeholders, they hash through it, and of course, in developing public policy, there's always some conflict. But they hash it out and try to come to the best solution. And then there's a report given back to the MDC on what back to the VMB on what the recommendation is. My role in that, I hope, is to be a voice. And I have a large background too. So I hope to be a voice that can add to that discussion.
Thank you.
Great. Let's see, Dr. Noland.
Good morning, Dr. Waterhouse. Good to see you. The MDC meets quarterly before all board meetings. Aside from the quarterly half to full day meeting, members are typically assigned to several subcommittees, each of which may take an additional 2 to 6 hours or more per month. Given this information, can you commit to this expectation of time spent for the MDC and fulfill your role?
Yes, I'm in that part of my life where I can pretty much just dictate my own schedule. I can do what I want. And so, yes, I have no problem committing to that.
Great, thank you.
Ms. Sperber?
Good morning. The next question is recommendations made by the MDC, and you may have already answered some of this, are based on its consumer protection mandate, which may be unpopular with the general profession. How do you plan to handle making decisions based on the needs of consumers and their pets, despite possible disapproval from colleagues?
Yes, after having served on the VMB for 8 years, I'm familiar with that. And so it requires communication. I often would speak to my local VMA and try and do a ledge update and try and explain the reason behind certain laws and explain exactly the parameters of them. And so it really just comes down to, as it does in clinical practice, it's just trying to figure out what is the best route, what is the best method, what is the best way forward. So you just do what you have to do and try and explain your thinking.
Thank you.
Okay, good morning again. As a veterinarian, we assume you are familiar with current trends in veterinary medicine, but which issues have affected you directly and would you like the MDC to address?
the current discussion on VCPR, you know, the changing the VCPR, I think that's a very important discussion, and I'm sure we're not completely done with that. Certainly cannabis is, as was mentioned before, cannabis is important. We have clients ask about it every day, and we're not done with that topic. Compounding, I was on the VMB, I was the one that brought up that compounding was kind of this unknown entity, and we should work on trying to get that more defined. And we're still kind of in the process of that. And telemedicine, that is a topic that still needs a lot of discussion.
Thank you. Dr. Solis.
Yes. So good morning, Dr. Waterhouse. Can you think of any position that you hold or activities that you're currently involved in that may present a conflict for you to serve as a member of the MDC and thus a representative of the Veterinary Medical Board?
No conflicts. I am on the board of the local VMA, but that's not a conflict. And I was also appointed by the AVMA to the American Board of Veterinary Specialists, but that's not a conflict either.
Thank you.
Great. Ms. Bowler.
Good morning again. Is there anything else you'd like to share with the board this morning?
I think the MDC is a really critical part. I actually have told people when I was appointed to the board and after I'd been on it for a year or so, I said, you know, the MDC is really where all the action is. And so anyway, it has a really important role in hashing out these problems. And so I just look forward to trying to be a voice on that.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Dr. Waterhouse, for coming again and applying again and your continued interest and dedication to the field. All right, so for the rest of the board, we are so lucky to have such a great two great people to choose from. It's I feel like we've had these tough decisions before, and I just am really grateful for the two applicants today. I see Dr. or not Doctor, you're going to be Doctor today, Ms. Bowler. We can't hear you. You're muted.
I said I spend enough time with all the vets, so maybe it wears off on me. Thank you, both Dr. Tansey and Dr. Waterhouse, and thank you, Dr. Tansey, for your work with the SMEs. That's critical and a critical part of the board. I would like to nominate, at this point, Dr. Waterhouse to fill this position, veterinary position on the MDC. I think her longtime service to the board, and we have a lot of new members on the MDC, I think it would be a great asset. So I would like to do that.
Dr. Nolan?
I would be happy to second that.
So just to clarify, Ms. Bowler, if you don't mind reading the motion that's available in the materials.
Okay. Let me go back to the materials. I am sorry about that. I did not actually. Okay, got it. So I would like. Is that okay right now? Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay, got it. Whoops. I'd like to make a motion to appoint Dr. Cheryl Waterhouse to the MDC to serve the remaining veterinarian member term until June 30, 2023, that's right, and then serve the full veterinarian member term from July 1, 23 through June 30, 2026.
And Dr. Nolan, are you good with that?
I am, and again, tough decision, but yes, I am.
Great, thank you. Okay, discussion from the group. And I'm trying to look through the way that I to see any hands. Okay, I don't see any hands. I would just support that decision strongly. And Dr. Tansey, it's not that you are not a fantastic candidate as well. It really I think is just the wealth of knowledge and experience that Dr. Waterhouse brings. Really is something that we could use on the MDC. So I'd have to support that, but I really uh, uh, struggled with that with your credentials and your dedication as well. Okay, so I think since we don't have any other hands, am I missing any hands, Jessica? Oh, there's Ms. Bowler.
Just very quick, I was just going to say for Dr. Tansey, there will be other openings on the MDC for veterinarian positions. So please, please, please stay involved. And
absolutely. No, I appreciate all the opportunity. And Dr. Waterhouse, you're awesome. So you go. That's great. I look forward to seeing what everybody does.
Well, we haven't voted yet. We haven't had public comment, but yeah. Okay, so I don't see any other hands, so let's open it up to the public moderator, please.
Moderator, I am opening up the Q&A, and give me just a moment as I transition back to the instructions. But the Q&A is now open. The instructions will appear on the screen here shortly, but if you would like to participate, you can raise your hand by clicking the hand raise feature, which is on the command row. You can also click on the question mark inside of the square, typically lower right corner of your WebEx screen, and there you can type the word comment in the text field that appears. And the instructions are now on the screen for your reference. And those who are calling in, press *3 to raise your virtual hand. At this time, I don't see any requests coming in. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, please. Is there any other comments from the board? I don't see any other hands up. So I think we are down to taking a vote.
Dr. Solicito?
Yes.
Ms. Bowler?
Aye.
Dr. Grant?
Yes.
Ms. Laredo?
Yes.
Dr. Nolan?
Yes.
Ms. Berber?
Yes.
Dr. Bradbury?
Yes.
Motion carries. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yay, congratulations, Dr. Waterhouse. And yes, Dr. Tansey, please. I think
Yes.
early next year we have, I think, anyway, we will have openings in the near future as people term out. So we really look forward to seeing you again. So
Absolutely.
Thank you again for
everybody.
coming.
I really appreciate your time. Thank you. It's nice to meet all of you. Best
You
of luck.
too.
I look forward to seeing
Thank you.
how you do. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Okay, I am still struggling with my multiple screens here, so please forgive me. We are now on, I think what we're going to do is we'll go to agenda item 4, and then we will take a quick break after that. So agenda item 4, Ms. Bowler.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. We could have probably if I had known about this, it probably would have been on our agenda in April, but I didn't find out until after our meeting. This agenda item has to do with the AAVSB and ICVA. The AAVSB appoints 4 delegates or 4 members, representatives to the ICVA board, and 3 vets, 1 public, and of course, I'm the public member and have been. And we have 1 vet. What I didn't realize is there's a veterinarian opening due to COVID. The AAVSB postponed elections for a year, And what it did is it just rejiggered some of these terms. We have a veterinarian, Dr. Helen Tuzio, who has been on the ICVA board from AAVSB for 2 terms. And I didn't realize she is up for her 3rd term election this September. And she is a board certified feline vet out of New York and has been with that board for over 20 years. She's also licensed in California and has been for many years. I think she secretly wants to move out here and practice out here. So hopefully we'll get her. But Dr. Tuzio is up for appointment re-election. And I, in addition to all the work she has done for ICVA, she's currently the Secretary Treasurer. She's an incredible volunteer. She's an item writer. She works on the pool review. She's on various committees with the AVMA, the ECFEG, and was on the AAVSB board some years ago for a time. So she's pretty well known, but she's just so invaluable to the ICVA board that I would like to suggest, the New York board has already done this, of course, but I'd like to suggest that we support her election, and Dr. Bradbury will be able to vote on that in September when we're in Kansas City or wherever the conference is. But that we also do a letter of support, so the AVSB might include that in her materials when they put all these things out. I don't know if she'll be contested or not, but I'm just wanted to request that of our board because she's really an important person on the ICVA. And I would obviously, if anyone has any questions, this is a little different, off topic, but it's similar to what we did for Dr. Nunez, of course, because he's up for re-election for the board position.
Kathy, can I just get a clarification for Dr. Tuesday? Did the New York board already nominate her and you're asking for the board to support the nomination, or you asked? Okay.
Yes, it's just another letter of support. The New York board, she of course reapplied once she realized, she did not even realize she was up for re-election because of the confusion. So she reapplied, and the New York board sent a strong letter of support and some backup materials for her and is actively supporting her. So this is just sort of an additional letter of support and an additional motion of support. I think other states may do that as well. I just don't know.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. I don't know if there's any questions from the board. I'm looking down the line here. I don't see any questions. Is there anyone who wants to make a motion?
Do you want me to make it, or?
Sure.
Wait for someone else? All right. Well, I'd like to move that our board, excuse me, take a position of support for Dr. Helen Tuzio to be reelected from the AAVSB to the ICVA, and then send a letter of support.
Great, I'll second that. Is there any other comments or questions from the board? Down the line, I don't see any hands. Moderator, would you open that up to the public for public comment, please?
Yes, this is the moderator. The Q&A is now open. The instructions are on the screen for your reference. If you're logged in and would like to participate, you can click the question mark inside of the square, typically lower right corner of your WebEx screen, and type the word comment in the text field, and make sure it goes to all panelists before hitting the send button. Or you can raise your hand by pressing the hand icon, typically bottom center of your WebEx screen on the command row. If you're calling in, press *3 from your phone to raise your virtual hand. At this time, I don't see any requests for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, please. And I don't see any other hands up in our group. So let's call for a vote.
Dr. Polacito?
Yes.
Ms. Bullard? Ms. Bowler, I don't think we heard you.
Yes. Sorry. Did you hear
All right.
that? Sorry.
Yes,
I
thank you.
don't know what my computer's doing.
Dr. Grant,
Yes.
Ms. Laredo,
Yes.
Dr. Nolan,
Yes.
Ms. Ferber,
Yes.
Dr. Bradbury.
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you.
Okay, so I did threaten a break right here, but I was going off of the time that I was logged in and realized it's only been 45 minutes. So why don't we go ahead and move on to agenda item number 5 and at least get through some of these. I think, and then we can take a break. Unless, is there anyone dying for a 5-minute break here? Nobody's speaking up. Okay. So we're going to do agenda item 5, number A1. Jessica, can you start us off with that?
Sure. Yes. So I will just introduce the bill and turn it over to the executive committee to give more details about the meeting. But as you recall, members, 1399, AB 1399 is regarding VCPR and telemedicine. The board in April had a pretty lengthy conversation about this, as I have in the past. And the board did ultimately take an opposed position, but they did specifically ask for an off-calendar meeting, which was this one, to talk, allow the executive committee and I to talk with the stakeholders and the author's office, and then report back to the board after that meeting, and then rediscuss it at that time. And so the executive committee and I met with the author's office and the sponsors, and I really want to thank ASPCA and the San Diego Humane Society for their time and the discussions that we had. The executive committee went through all of the concerns that were raised during the board meeting. I think the main issue that I think it was a sticking point was being able to establish that VCPR via telemedicine. I think that the executive committee shared just the overall support from the board regarding telemedicine and how they do encourage veterinarians to use telemedicine, but to establish that VCPR via in-person was the biggest concern without establishing in-person. And so with that, after the discussions, the stakeholders were kind enough to send a follow-up email to us with their understanding of what the concerns were, the questions that were asked, and then their responses to it, and then agreed to allow that to be provided in the meeting material. So you'll see that in the memo. So in the italics, those are the questions that were posed, and then they provided the responses. So with that, I'll turn it over to the executive committee for anything I missed. Dr. Waterhouse, I think you're muted if you're talking. I'm sorry, Dr. Bradbury.
Oh, good. I'm glad I was muted. So, okay. So basically, Dr. Solicito, Jessica, Tara, and myself met with the group, and they were very amenable to having a constructive discussion, which I really appreciated. They do want to, keep the consumers in mind, and obviously they have a different feeling about the establishment of a VCPR. I think the very first thing that was made clear was that the discussion about establishing a VCPR through video means and having that be, that was the basis of this bill, that was not up for discussion in their opinion. And so we really didn't spend much time, although I do know that is the main concern of the board members. It didn't seem to be as constructive, and at least for me, to just kind of get stuck on that and go around in circles on that. So with that knowledge that there was going to be no give in that department, we tried to focus on some other things that we might find some common ground on with regards to kind of putting belts and suspenders on this legislation and trying to make it as consumer protective as possible and animal protective. So you have here the all of the different topics, and somehow I have lost them, even though I had them up. Here we go. So I know Kathy brought this up, and it's definitely a concern of mine. And I think everybody that, you know, based on the legislation as it was written, it appears that there was never going to be a requirement for an in-person exam. So this first point here about will the pets go their entire life without seeing a veterinarian if telehealth VCPR is allowed? And they had some, I felt like, you know, interesting and reasonable responses to that. Although I would still be uncomfortable that there's no requirement for a physical in-person exam. They did have some good points, which are written here for you. This was their response to some of those concerns. The other couple of things I think that they're written out here, so I don't want to go over those too much in detail, and I'm sure that we have some people here to discuss that a little bit in the public comment portion of this. There are a few other items that I think if we wanted to propose amendments, we could discuss, which would be how to ensure better consumer protections. And one of the thoughts I had was some sort of a statement that needed to be given to and acknowledged by the consumer that there are limitations to telehealth, particularly in regards to early detection of things like heart murmurs, abdominal masses, and such. And so I do think that it would be helpful, because I don't know that consumers themselves are aware of sort of what we can find on an in-person physical exam versus what could be achieved through telehealth. And so educating clients and consumers regarding what the limitations are and requiring that as part of practicing telehealth, to me, I think would improve consumer protection should this go through. And then I think for the Can We Align AB 1399 with the board's definition of client, I feel like they were very open to looking at and possibly using our long discussed definition of clients. So I would propose that we send that over to them and ask them to use that instead of their current definition. The other concern, looking at things that I think we talked about at the board meeting about having access to local veterinary care if needed. You know, we're worried about having telehealth centers outside of, you know, California that are providing telehealth, but then saying, well, you need to see a veterinarian, and then having no veterinarian nearby for them to see, and they don't even know where to refer, and perhaps they wouldn't have any ability to get an appointment anyway because they aren't an established client. So there are some other states that have some wording in their legislation, and Idaho is the one that I found that does have some more specific requirements of the veterinarians to, I think, have an established relationship with a local hospital. So I think that the prescribing comment here is something that that Tara brought up, and I think I am not clear about this as to whether their response is satisfies Tara's concerns. I have a feeling it doesn't, but I think we'll hear from Tara maybe about that topic. And that was really it. Dr. Solicito, do you have anything to add about our meeting?
Yes, thank you, Dr. Bradbury. What I would like to say is this bill and the discussion that we've had with the stakeholders actually has been very, I would say, challenging for me, because with my background in shelter medicine and in government service, I would tell you all that the reality of the problems of accessing services, veterinary services, is real. And through the years, it has gotten worse. I feel, even if we don't say like, hey, are we really in a crisis right now? I think we're getting there. So the value of telemedicine, I think, is something that we need to keep in mind. And I feel like during the discussion, the biggest thing that we need to overcome is with regards to the VCPR. And I like what Dr. Bradbury had mentioned about maybe a more well-defined like education for the consumers, knowing what they're signing up for, is something that we need to consider, adding into the language or something like guidelines. But I really hope that we could get over this whole VCPR requirement, the in-person VCPR, because the reality is there's just no ability for a lot of people, a lot of the pet owning population to access care. Just in LA County, we have areas where there are just no veterinary offices in like a 25-mile radius. And we have to bring the services to the constituents just to make sure that they are being able to provide care. And it's not like they don't want to, that's just a problem. So I would say, and I don't want to repeat like what Dr. Bradbury had said, based on, the discussion, there seem to be a lot of opportunities for us to be working together to make this bill happen. That's all.
Thanks. Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. Dr. Nolan.
Well, I just wanted to thank both of you and Jessica for working hard for us to go and talk to the supporters of this bill and the authors. I think it is, as you've both mentioned, a very important issue. I think there's a lot of sides to it. I think it's more complex than we know. I do want to. I've been giving it a lot of careful consideration, and I wanted to address some of the responses. They first quote that the American Veterinary Medical Association says that approximately 1 out of 3 pets already does not receive regular veterinary care. But I would like to actually bring up that the American Veterinary, the Access to Veterinary Care Coalition did a report in 2018, and it was really a groundbreaking report, one of the first major studies to look at why we're having such in my mind, crisis. And so I want to quote from that report, page 22. Overwhelmingly, the reason for not being able to obtain the preventative care desired was financial, regardless of the pet owner's income category. 8 of 10 pet owners who were unable to secure the desired care indicated they were not able to afford it. From the same study in 2018, 3 out of 4 of those who reported not being able to secure sick care stated the barrier occurred due to financial reasons. So I think it's really important. I do think that there is opportunities for this, this bill to provide access to care for a minority of people who perhaps are not able to get it because of location or inability to get their large dog into a car, et cetera. But by far, overwhelmingly, most of it is because of financial concerns. So I went ahead and went on Google, and within 30 seconds, I found 10 different veterinary consult services. So I clicked on the first one that said it had services for California for vet consultation. And they asked me to say, was it vomiting or diarrhea? Pick a category: vomiting, diarrhea, skin problems, urinary problems, behavior, etc. So I clicked skin, and since I'm not quite in LA County, I clicked LA County because I'm in a small area. I said I'd like to have some veterinarian give me some advice, online for this. I had a plethora of opportunities. I picked the first 2 veterinarians that had appointments immediately for online consultation. I went ahead and, of course, being who I am, I checked to see if they were really licensed in California, as they said they were. They said they had, they said they were, they specialized in, there you go, Dr. Brett. They had specialized in skin and ear infections, whatever that means. They both were licensed in California, but the address on one was up in the Sacramento area, and the address for the second was in Arkansas. Hence my problem. If we are going to allow these veterinarians to prescribe dangerous drugs, which are what prescription drugs are, according to definition, how are we going to support consumer protection by allowing those people to prescribe medications? That's one of my biggest concerns with allowing a video-based VCPR. So if there was a way we could put in this legislation that they have to be tied to a California premise, I'm all for it. But if you can't, then, well, I'm not all for it, to be honest, because I also did a little bit of research, and you guys will have to bear with me, but there was an article in the Journal of the American Academy of Dermatology. These are human dermatologists. And the article came out, a recent study in October of 2022. And online diagnostic efforts correctly diagnose skin disorders 30.8% of the time. 70% of the online diagnostics for human dermatologists are wrong. At the end of this article in the journal, they pleaded with consumers to go to get a physical exam. It could save their life, because some of those misdiagnoses were cancer. And people can talk on the online diagnostics. They can say it itches, it doesn't itch, etc. So I really, as much as we are making progress with our remote medical attention, I don't think that it's protecting the consumer in California by allowing licensed veterinarians that do not have a premise location to do this. I struggle with that. So I really, I know it is a complex issue, but for those reasons, I still am very opposed to establishing a remote VCPR to prescribe drugs.
Yeah, this is Barry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm all in favor of remarks that Dr. Nolan has made as well. And when I consider the consumer affairs, I think someone's got to be protecting these animals, and for people to call in, get on telemedicine and whatnot, and end up with an incorrect diagnosis really isn't doing them much of a favor. I don't have the documented percentages, but I would agree with when I see neurologic cases or lameness cases that are sent to me in video, that'd be about that percentage are entirely wrong. These are often sent by supposedly lifelong horsemen and whatnot who just kind of feel like the veterinarian's wrong, they're going to turn it out or whatever. The animal's been suffering for 8 months and they finally bring it to the veterinarian. I see with the communications around what is wrong with people getting a hold of a veterinarian and say, this is what the signs are and whatnot, what should I do? And so this is why you need to take it to get a hands-on physical exam. You know, I appreciate that there's a lot of people who perhaps can't afford or whatnot, but if we're going to protect the animals and the owners of those animals, sometimes they don't make good decisions and they put the finances in the way. That's not correct.
Thanks. I think Kathy and then Dr. Nolan.
Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Nolan, for, of course, that research and a lot of what you said. When I read, thank you also, Executive Committee and Assembly Member Friedman and her staff, et cetera, for working with us on this. And I agree with Dr. Solicito. It's a very complicated and complex situation. But I wondered, I read their answers, the stakeholders' answers to us, and then wrote my answers back. And I wondered, like, about the biggest obstacle mostly being money and things like that in my notes here. Are we, in one procedural thing, are we going to respond to their answers to us or their thoughts from a board perspective, or do we even need to at this point?
I was hoping to respond, but wanted the board's feedback, you know, and to be able to respond with what we all came to a consensus on, or as close to a consensus.
Okay, that makes sense. And I really like your idea, Dr. Bradbury, about the major disclaimer with sort of clearly stating that, you know, the limitations on a video. But I think we're kind of nibbling at the edges here, because the bottom line is it will give some care to animals, but it will put some animals in danger, because there will be with good intentions, but a wrong diagnosis and the wrong medication. The other thing, that disclaimer is one thing to add to this whole deal. The other thing is potentially, like Dr. Dolan found, one vet had a premises in Sacramento. Well, that doesn't really help you if you're living in LA and you need to go. So maybe there's a limit on, and I don't know that this bill could do that, because I think there's commerce and other things, but a requirement that any veterinarian be obviously licensed in California and have a premises in the vicinity of the client or something like that. Again, I don't know if that even is possible. But I still struggle with this whole premise of the video consult, medication, and then potentially never seeing a vet. And I think they're going to add the client. They added that the veterinarians have to be in California, I think, from what I saw. But I realize they're not going to move off the video VCPR thing. So I'm struggling, I know we've taken a position already. I don't know if any amendments. It would be great to get some of these amendments in, but I don't know if it would move me to a support position still, because I just am concerned about the protection, mostly of the animals. I agree. I want to make it convenient for the consumers, absolutely. But, I think it's going to be a minority, because it is a cost situation. They're going to have to pay for the video conference too. So anyway, that is what I think right now.
Yeah, thanks, Kathy. Did you want to share your response to those questions, or did you just summarize that for us?
I didn't, I just put things like biggest obstacle is money. But I had, so how do they guarantee that the client will have access to a veterinarian? I had little notes like that all through it. And then I wondered if we had other responses from other stakeholders like CVMA. That was my notes, but I assume we'll hear from them. because I assume they're working with the author as well.
Yeah,
So I don't have
okay.
anything really good to give you.
No worries. Thank you. Dr. Nolan and then Dr. Solicito.
I just had forgotten to mention that I didn't go any further with my veterinary consult because it was a $55 charge. They wanted my credit card. So Kathy is exactly right. There's a plethora of opportunity to get veterinary teleconsultations right now. And again, my issue remains the vicinity of the veterinarian giving the consult to a premise that is actually going to help the client, because they're going to pay for the teleconsult and then they're going to at some point pay for the medications that are shipped to them. But as we all know, then most of the time they're going to end up probably having to go and get seen. And so you're doubling, your office call. So that's I forgot to mention that.
No, I was actually wondering about that. I also just want to mention that most people, or many people, I shouldn't say most, but many people who are struggling financially may not have a credit card to be able to do these things online. I would expect perhaps the exams to be a little bit less expensive since there's less overhead, but that doesn't mean they will be. The other thing on the other side of this, these veterinarians will be held to the same standards as any, so if they are misdiagnosing and they are prescribing the incorrect medications, they would be subject to discipline. So it doesn't change those requirements, and that might, it just obviously would depend on people complaining or not, or knowing that had actually happened, because that sometimes is difficult for a consumer to know. But I just wanted to remind everyone of that. Dr. Solicito.
Yes, I just wanted to clarify the way that I view this whole telemedicine thing is like, it's not an absolute fix for access to care, right? So this is just a tool that we are going to be providing those veterinarians that would like to have that ability to expand their ability to help the community. I think the way that we're looking at the VCPR and like the cost of consultation, the cost of veterinary care is looked at with the lens of like private practice. Let us not forget that there is a huge amount of efforts from nonprofits and from community outreach veterinarians that would actually make it affordable for people. This is just a tool for this group, like the animal welfare industry. I know we've been involved in our own grant funding to make sure that we're being able to provide these services to the community. Having this tool would actually would enable us to expand that opportunity. The whole access to care and aligned care program is actually looking at things more of how can the private practice community can assist and participate in providing that access. I agree the cost of care, the financial concerns is a huge part of it's a huge obstacle for people to provide care to their pets. But let us not also forget that if we're able to help them somewhat with that finances, to be able to help the veterinarians that could expand their ability to do that, I think telemedicine is the answer.
I think it's great that you're a member of our board. So thank you for that perspective, because I do think we forget. We all are viewing things through our own lenses and from our own experiences. And I know that there probably will be a huge group that would be providing this at low or no cost for people in the through shelters and animal welfare organizations. And I do think I know that I sort of forgot that. So I appreciate you reminding us of that, and that this bill has come from that side of things. So, I don't know if Tara can just talk to us about.
Christina, can I
the-
interrupt and ask Dr. Salacito a question?
Of course.
Sorry, I just didn't want to lose this train of thought. I really appreciate you bringing up the point that there is a large nonprofit sector that could really help to provide lower cost services, which is really the ultimate problem we have, is the cost. So my question to you though is there a way, because obviously there's a huge for-profit engine that is already established, that has already got advertising, marketing, a big jump on things. Would there be a way we could somehow in this recommend that they look at this bill and allow the video VCPR establishment for only nonprofits, or only, is there a way? I don't know if there's a way to do that, but I would throw that back at you, Dr. Salacito, and say, how could we somehow establish the provision of low cost or free care that would be benefited from the ability to use telemedicine, but would limit the extortion, in my mind, of veterinary care from those huge profit engines that are already making a lot of money. So I throwing that back at you.
Dr. Nolan, thank you for that. If I just have my magic wand, I would, try to make things happen and remove all the bad actors that are out there. But I think that question actually would fall on, probably Tara could help us, and guide us into like putting the language of how we could exclude or include, certain groups, because the limit of my understanding is more of the intent of the bill and the reality of what is out there. So I think it is worth exploring.
Yeah, we really did have a conversation about allowing animal regulation services and humane society, clinics to have more leeway than perhaps others, because they were providing a service that was pretty much free or very low cost. So I think we already have a little bit of a precedent. We've thought through that, and I just wondered if there's a way we could expand that so that this would allow help for the people that need it the most, but would also protect the consumer from this whole idea of, if you have a credit card and want to pay another $55, then we'll prescribe a dangerous drug, including most likely antibiotics that we're trying to control the use of without evidence-based need. So anyway, thank you for
I totally hear you, Dr. Nolan. And I would have to say, unfortunately, we do have players in the industry, that would take advantage of situations like this. And yeah, whatever we could do as a board to truly protect the consumers, I'm all for it.
Ms. Laredo, I see your hand is up.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I agree and appreciate all of the comments that have been made by all of the members. I just wanted to put in my perspective. I know a lot of times as humans, when we have something going on, we call our doctor, we speak to a nurse, and they'll tell us either come in immediately or, maybe take some ibuprofen and see a doctor in the morning. But I've mentioned before that owners will go to Dr. Google. What's even worse is when they become desperate because they don't have any care, and they may try to just relieve maybe pain. So they might do something like give a cat Tylenol. So it would be my hope that any type of a telemedicine vet, I don't care where they're licensed, would at the very least explain that Tylenol is extremely toxic to cats. Please don't do it. But from my perspective, just in being in a low income community in kind of a rural area, people do get desperate and do silly things. So I look at it through the lens of palliative care and keeping pets comfortable. I can see Dr. Nolan's point that this could really have some long-term effects if something is misdiagnosed. But just from my perspective, I look at it as keeping pets comfortable. I have a 17-year-old corgi sleeping behind me on the floor right now. And I know that sometimes we do get desperate just to relieve their pain and keep them comfortable. So I just wanted to add that at the very least, I would hope that they would get some kind of educated advice on not doing things that could worsen the pet's condition. But I do understand that things will be missed. It is not a great standard of care. For me, I look at it as an emergency situations.
Thanks, Jennifer. I don't see any other hands up in our group. I was hoping that Tara could just go over the last point. How does the ability to prescribe treatment via telehealth under AB 1399 relate to federal regulations regarding in-person BCPR requirements, and their response to that, and just kind of fill us in on the concerns.
Hi, this is Tara Welch, Board Counsel. I think their response is correct. My concern with that was just making it clear in the bill itself for veterinarians and consumers what the extent of the veterinarian's ability to prescribe certain medications under federal law, because you change state law, it looks like everything's covered, as long as you're following this state law, you're complying with federal law. But, for off-brand prescriptions, that's not necessarily going to be the case. So a veterinarian prescribing prescriptions through telemedicine without ever having performed an in-person exam may violate federal law. I was just recommending that the sponsors take a look at that issue and perhaps clarify it in the bill. It is a policy call for you guys. I think, it's up to the sponsors how they want to address it. Perhaps CVNA has a position on this as well. I think that getting back to the definition of client, it's important to amend that as it's currently proposed in the bill. If client is amended to exclude the inclusion of agent, I think that the bill should then also include the provision that the board's legislative proposal included that separately authorized the client. It provided that the client could authorize an agent to act on the client's behalf. So there's definition of client, and then separately there's a provision that the client can authorize an agent. That way it's not combined into one definition of client. It's anybody who shows up with the animal, which we know is problematic in certain veterinary practices, such as equine. So I think, if you're working with the author's office and sponsors on clarifying the definition of client, it's probably going to need to be those two pieces, the definition of client, but also that the client can authorize an agent on their behalf. With respect to limiting corporations from offering veterinary services, it's an issue to raise. I don't have all the answers on that. I think as long as the bill is limiting the provision of telemedicine veterinary services to be performed by California licensed veterinarians, that's helpful. On the other hand, if somebody's located in Arkansas, they have a California license, it just becomes more difficult for the board to discipline that individual. Or at least it may become more difficult for the individual to defend themselves against a board accusation if there's misconduct. So, these are things down the line to consider. But at the end of the day, I think the board, is primarily wrestling with the concept of just no exam, even though the board reviewed and approved its own legislative recommendation that properly addressed the various types of telemedicine, which was appropriate to protect consumers and the animals. So I think the board needs to decide whether you want to maintain your current position on the bill, if there are any amendments to provide to the author's office. And going forward, I'm not exactly sure how you would, or the sponsors would even accept revisions to limit corporate provision of veterinary services to make sure that the client and animal have access to a nearby premises in case in-person services are necessary, and also trying to keep costs low.
Thank you. Dr. Grant.
Yes, I was just thinking of a scenario where someone calls up to one of these people that Dr. Nolan had identified on there and says, I've got a mare that cut her leg really severely. We've got on bandages. She keeps trying to bite the bandages off. I'm out in the country and I can't quite get it. I want to get some sedation to be able to give her until she gets over this. And could you give me a prescript, or if you're possible, maybe you could just send me a bottle of Rompin. You know, and they could actually, here's a video of the mare chewing her bandages off. Well, we all know now with the artificial intelligence, you can get a video pretty easily of a horse looking like they're chewing their bandages off. It's on store, and all of a sudden you've got a dangerous drug in the hands of somebody you don't know that they even own a horse, and they're just going to use it to supplement other medications with fentanyl or whatever. So I really just, one more time, I think that we can't get over the hands-on exam. I can see for an emergency situation sometime, but the emergency situation is only to get some drugs. I don't think that's right. I think we need to be able to do that. And I think there are veterinarians around who can give advice and talk to people on the phone and say, it sounds like you need to get your colicky horse to a veterinarian. And if you're a horse owner, you should have made plans ahead of time about getting a trailer and everything else in to get it taken care of, so that the animal's not suffering. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Grant. That's a yet another aspect that I hadn't thought about with xylazine and artificial intelligence. I think there might be something in there. I don't know if there's something in there regarding ways to ensure that it's actually at the same time and place, but that's another big concern. Kathy.
Thank you, and thanks, Dr. Grant. Yeah, very good points about that. Well, and I was even thinking the sedation, even if they were using it on a horse, you don't know what else is going on with that horse and whether that sedation is appropriate or not. I mean, there's so many reasons, so many issues with that one. I had a question for Tara, and I'm sorry, I don't remember, but in the whole judicious use of antimicrobials, is there anything that's tied in the federal VCPR or state VCPR to prescription of antimicrobials other than the concept of being judicious in terms of a in-person VCPR? I guess there isn't, but I just wanted to confirm that. I couldn't remember when we had all that discussion before when the bill came forward, both federal and state bills. So that's my question for Tara.
I don't know that off the top of my head. I wasn't with the board at the time that law went into effect. I mean, generally speaking, a veterinarian has to prescribe. All of the responsibility of antimicrobials is on veterinarians. And then there's, the specific statute that speaks to those types of prescriptions. I don't recall off the top of my head where that is. Yeah, I'm not sure. Maybe Jessica or staff might know more.
If I had to guess, I'd say no, but I've got nothing else other than just a guess right now. I don't know for sure off the top of my head.
Okay. I am seeing
Can
no
I
other.
can I just add a comment, Dr. Bradbury? I do recognize the concerns, but I hope we are not forgetting that the veterinarian still has the last say and will make the decision if they would find it appropriate for, to prescribe medication or to prescribe a visit, an actual visit to like a veterinarian to have a physical exam. So I'm hoping that we're not kind of like lumping everything into like specific problems or scenarios, because there are different ways that things can be approached, and ultimately we're relying on the veterinarian to be making the decision of what is best for the patient, for the client, and for himself. That's all.
Yeah, there was a person, I feel like he was in Michigan, who made that comment at one of the AAVSB I don't know if it was a seminar or it was just a discussion on it, and that we trust a veterinarian to go in a room and make appropriate decisions, and why are we not able to trust a veterinarian in a video visit to see that oh, actually you need to be seen, you need to have your animal seen by a veterinarian, and that to me was a compelling discussion, because we it would be still trusting a veterinarian to make the appropriate decisions, and I think no matter what we do, there will always be some bad actors that aren't going to make the decisions based on the animal's best interest and the consumer's best interest, regardless of whether they're going into a room and barely putting their hands on the patient and prescribing medication, because they want to put 6 clients in an hour, see 6 patients in an hour so that they can maximize their profits versus somebody on a video. So I think that is something also to definitely keep in mind, and I appreciate that. And then Dr. Nolan, and then once we're done with our discussion, just to kind of give a little bit of a heads up, I think because of the timing and the number of people that likely want to comment on this, once we're done with our discussion, we'll probably take a 15-minute break, and then we'll come back and we'll start the public discussion. It's a little bit out of order as usual, but I think that makes the most sense to me. Dr. Nolan.
I appreciate Dr. Salacito's comment, but I would give you probably a worst case scenario in that if we do allow California licensed veterinarians to do practice telemedicine that are outside of a premise, tied to a premise, let's say they're in Arkansas, the poor person I'm using for that. But anyway, all they have to do if there's a complaint is surrender their license, and we have zero way to protect the consumer, right? So if somebody that is practicing telemedicine and prescribing dangerous drugs has a license in California and a license somewhere else, and they get a complaint and we start to pursue it, all they have to do is surrender their license and be done. And that's not very protective of the consumer in my mind. And they can probably go ahead and practice in another state anyway, because they never were actually convicted of anything in California. So I think Tara is right about the complexity of actually doing disciplinary work with someone who is able to just, walk away from a license because it's something that they do on the side to make money via telemedicine. I mean, that's just my 2 bits worth, but. And then also, I would also ask if we could make it a short break, because I am going to have to jump off of the call, and I'd love to be involved in a vote if possible. So if we could do the break more like 5 or 10 minutes, that would be good for me.
Sure, absolutely. Dr. Solacito?
Just a quick comment about that. I hope we're not going to make a decision for the exceptions rather than the rule. I still believe that like the general, percentage of veterinarians practicing out there are going to be trying to do the right thing. And, and that's where I put my trust in.
Okay, I'm going to say Jessica and then Kathy. I think we're going around in circles a little bit, but I do want to hear Jessica. What Jessica?
Thank you. I just wanted to make a clarification for what Dr. Nolan was saying, because Dr. Nolan, you talked about limiting telemedicine to those who have a premises in California. And I just wanted to clarify that you're speaking specifically to being able to establish the VCPR via telemedicine if they have a premises, right? No, you're not saying anyone using telemedicine in general has to have a premises, because right now that's not current law, and that's not what this bill would be touching either. So I just wanted clarification.
Right, and I agree with Dr. Salacito. I'm not trying to actually, push something that is just for the exception. I think I think the veterinarians that are providing telemedicine or teleconsulting right now are doing it to the best of their ability and trying to help. I'm just saying our role is to protect the consumer, and that is the scenario that I'm concerned about. That's all.
Okay. I see that Kathy took her hand down. So I hope I'm not stifling too much conversation, but we'll have a chance to discuss further after public comment. Why don't we take a 10-minute break so that we can go to the bathroom and perhaps refill a coffee or something. So if we can come back at, I have 10:36 now, so let's say 10:45. We'll do a 9-minute break.
We do have a quorum if you want to continue.
Okay. I had said that we would take public comment, but I actually think we need to have a motion, or it would be better if we had a motion on the table that we could then have public comment on and then discuss from there. Does anyone have a motion? Okay, well, with what I'm hearing from everyone, it seems. Oh, yes, Kathy.
Well, I just wanted to clear. I'm sorry. I'm having to wrap a dog's foot while we're doing this right now. We have a position on this bill, and I wanted to have Jessica read it exactly what we did in April, because any motion I just wanted to clarify would be to adjust that position, right, or keep it the same, or I don't know, but I just wanted to make sure I knew what you were asking for.
Yeah, Jessica, do you have anything to add to that? Yes is no.
Yeah, so the board took an opposed position. So we did not offer any amendments. It was opposed. However, the board did direct the executive committee and I to reach out and engage in conversations with the stakeholders in the author's office, and then bring it back to the board during the off-calendar meeting. So that's what is in place. So you could, if you wanted to maintain the current position, you could take a motion or oppose any changes to the motion, or vote no on any changes to the motion. To leave status quo, it doesn't require a motion if you just want to leave it there. If you also could do a motion to oppose unless amended. You could do the motion to support if amended, or support. You could also do a motion to remove any position on the bill. So those are the options.
I think before we do that, I do want to just mention that there's a lot of support for this bill in the legislature, and I don't know that, I think it does matter that there is a high likelihood, I think, that this, regardless of our position, is going to go through. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't, vote with what we believe, but I do really want to maintain communication and discussions with the authors, because they have been very willing to discuss that. And I am concerned if we just have a hard oppose and we stop talking to them, that, I want to try and at least work with them, if this is going to pass, to have a law that has some additional consumer protections in place. So, and then back to, does anyone have a motion, or should we just leave things as is? Kathy.
Then, I don't have a complete motion here, but I'd like to, I think, motion and make a motion to, I guess it's oppose unless amended with some specific amendments that we would further discuss and detail. And those being, I'm just dropping, we'll talk through it later, but just this to get a motion on the board. A disclaimer, having a premises in California, in the region, things like we just talked about that will improve the bill, we think, in a way that might be helpful to us. I don't know if that's the appropriate motion, but I would just put that on the floor right now, and somebody can change. Jessica is going to change it, I think.
Just a little more clarification on that, Kathy, because there's been a lot of discussions and not necessarily everybody's agreeing on something. So what I would recommend, if you want to provide, we don't even have to do specific language today. You can just talk in generalities of things that you would like to see in this bill. You can do that as well. But there's been various things that have been discussed, so it would be really challenging to say just to cover all of the concerns raised, because there's various concerns and not everybody agrees with all of them.
Right. I assume we'd have to go into more detail and discussion on the amendments. I don't know, Dr. Bradbury, if that's what you're looking for, but keeps us at the table, I think.
Yeah, that is what I'm looking at, trying to keep at the table. Jessica, if there was a motion to oppose unless amended, and then going down the list of the things that are on the memo, is there time like by July to have the wordings of the amendment? I mean, that's the problem, right? Is that we're going to be trying to make specific amendments, and then we don't have a board meeting until July to approve those or not.
So you could do a position and propose general amendments, not specific wording. If you want to provide specific wording amendments, you would either have to do it at this meeting or at another off-calendar meeting, if you want to meet before July. So that's up to the board, but the board could, if there's some things that we heard about establishing the VCPR, if to California licensees who have a premises within the vicinity of the client. So while that's not specific amendments to the bill, if that's the general idea that you're requesting, we can just do the general idea. So things like that you can put in there without having to do another off-calendar meeting, if you're okay with not looking at the specific end of the day amendments.
Okay. All right. I like that idea, the general amendments. Kathy, do you like that idea?
Yeah, I do like that idea. And I realize, I assume the bill is on the assembly floor, Jessica? Okay. So,
yes, it is.
And calendar-wise, June 2nd is the House of Origin, so we assume it's going to leave the assembly in the form it's in now. Any amendments that we would work towards will be placed on it in the Senate, I assume, timing-wise. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm happy to help you with the amendments and Dr. Salcedo, Bradbury, et cetera, later on. Whoops.
So was there actually a motion made? I'm lost a little bit.
There was. I see there was a motion to oppose unless amended, and then we had to be. We asked Kathy to be a little bit more specific, and I don't think we got that specific. I see Dr. Grant had a question.
I would support Kathy's motion to oppose until amended, particularly with more stringent clarification of the role of telemedicine as to its validity and safeguards for prevention of misuse, something along that line. How do we know it's the people that they're using are actually legitimate? You know, I understand that it's nice to assume everybody is in it for the good of the animal and the patient and whatnot, but some people are not in it for that. And I think that's what we have to protect the consumers against.
Okay. So I think what we need though is a little bit more specific. So if I might, Kathy and Dr. Grant, so oppose unless amended with general amendments, and we can, I think I'm going to just read through I think some of the general amendments where veterinarians practicing telemedicine have a California premises that they're associated with. The addition of a more robust informed consent that outlines limitations of establishing a VCPR via video without a physical exam, adding or adjusting the definition of client and adding the statement of a client, the additional terms that Tara mentioned, that a client can appoint an agent to AB 1399, and I don't know there was anything else that we had a clear consensus, or not even, it wasn't even necessarily a consensus on these, but a clear discussion about. Would that summarize what you were talking about?
Christina, you said the California vet with the association with a premise permit in California, and Kathy added in the vicinity of the client or in the locale, or I know that's a little bit from a lawyer's
No, that's great. That's great.
But I would say something so that it's not someone in LA trying to prescribe drugs to someone up in Ukiah.
Yeah, and there was in that meeting I was talking about with the Michigan vet, I think there was an attorney on that who talked about having it like within a radius, like 50 miles or something like that. Kathy.
I was going to thank you, Dr. Nolan. That's one thing I was going to add. But then the other thing that was discussed, we had some discussion, and I think I don't know that it's possible, because I don't know that you can single out one type of business or nonprofit over another. But one thing we had discussed is perhaps, I don't think we can, limiting this to nonprofits or, giving nonprofits some sort of additional status to provide this kind of care. But I just wanted to bring that up because it was discussed. I don't think we can actually put it into words in terms of how to do it, and I'm not even sure it's legal to do. But I know Dr. Solicito, that came up at one point. So, but otherwise, the major disclaimer, the client definition, the premises in the vicinity of the client, I think are good additions to this bill if it's going out as is anyway.
Jessica, is that adequate for a motion? I don't know if you're talking.
I think we can get it. Tara, do you have concerns with that, or do you have a suggested change? I know Dr. Grant has his hand up as well.
Yeah. Do we want to hear Dr. Grant? Well, Dr. Grant?
Yes. Is it possible to have a proviso to a premise license that the premises is approved for telemedicine? And that way that site could be somewhat controlled, or at least supervised as to, they have to keep a list of clients and that sort of thing. Where are the clients? And we could keep a better eye on them there. It would seem like that might be a way even to give the people who are going to benefit from that a resource, like here are some practices that will practice telemedicine and can do things and are somewhat specialized in that area. It's probably too complex and too advanced, I think, for this bill right now, but I was just wondering.
And so currently there's no requirement for them to get any kind of approval before providing telemedicine, because any veterinarian in California can do that. So if you're looking at adding a requirement that if they're establishing the VC via telemedicine, that they have to somehow get approval from the board first or register, that's a completely separate ask.
This is Tara. I would just add that requiring some kind of board approval to provide telemedicine would create an administrative process necessary with fees for staff to process those types of applications. So I think that likely goes far beyond what the sponsors and author intend to do with the bill, and likely wouldn't be added at all. Plus, that would kind of stall the bill, because then the board would have to go through like a desk audit to determine, what are the staff costs to process those types of applications, and what kind of information or eligibility requirements would be necessary to gain board approval. So that's a bit difficult and complicated. As far as the motion itself, I think the 3 items to include in a request to amend the bill are clear enough. I was just wondering if one thing to consider is either an association with probably be association with a premises permit, and providing clients a list of veterinary premises within 50 miles of the client to take the animal into in the event of, veterinary services are needed after the telemedicine appointment. Maybe you could do both, like require a affiliation with a premises permit and provide clients with a list of local premises, so that they can, have a couple different options if there's a problem.
All right, Kathy, do you want to add that, or?
I think that's fine. I think it may be hard to do the list of other premises, but maybe it's not. I mean, just because, you have to, it's hard. Many premises aren't taking new clients. Many aren't, veterinarians aren't taking new clients, or maybe, I guess it would be on the televet to reach out and identify practices that will work and take, in that vicinity. Is that what you're talking about, Tara? As far as a list to provide to the client, I think it would be a great idea. I just don't know how workable it is in real life.
That's a fair point. Yeah, that's exactly what I was describing, and I think you've raised some valid concerns with going down that path. So perhaps that's not viable, but requiring affiliation with a premises permit would be.
Okay. And I think, isn't that basically what, Dr. Bradbury, when you identified basically the 3 items we've been discussing, that was really the crux of the California premises permit in the vicinity of?
Yep. Jessica?
I just had a clarification, or more of a question for clarification from Tara. When you say affiliation with a premises, what does that look like to you enforcement-wise? Because that could be all sorts of things, and it'd be hard to prove one way or the other. And so I was just curious.
That's a great point. I'm not really sure. I mean, are they employed by a premises? Do they have some kind of independent contract to come in and perform veterinary services at the premises? I'm not really sure. These are things that, you know, we lay on the table, and then, you know, we start to think about how to implement and enforce that provision. I really don't know.
So if the board wants to make sure that they are practicing within that premises, you could either put it in that they're employed by or practicing from that premises within the vicinity, or if the board just wants to make sure that there's veterinary premises within the vicinity of them. But affiliation to me would be a little too tough to enforce.
Yeah, I think your proposal to clarify the language to be employed. Well, I guess.
I think that's going to be, yeah, maybe a contract.
Associated with, or formal association with, or I don't know.
Can we just adopt the existing practice or the recommendation that we have, you know, with, you know, like shelters posting after hour care, you know, like they should have a list of providers. Maybe that's just something that we can require, you know, the veterinarians who are going to take on a client, that they would need to have at least a recommendation of practices around, you know, within the 50-mile radius or something, and not just leave the clients to figure that out on their own.
Yeah, I mean, I do think though that still leaves, you know, somebody who they have no idea, you know, like, and doesn't have any kind of affiliation. Yeah, I guess I've been trying to search for the Idaho wording, but I haven't really had the time. I apologize. Prior to this meeting, when I was getting set up, I had a lot of issues at home that prevented me from finding the wording. But in Idaho, they had some good language. I don't know. Anyway, I think it. To me, you know, having a relationship with some clinic in California would be important. I just don't know how to word that, but I really want to try and move this forward because we do have limited time and we have a lot of people that want to talk. I know I don't want to rush it either. It's important, but I don't know that we're going to have exact wording in this. I liked the idea that Tara had of putting it out there and then having some of these things, you know, worked out after. We're not working out the exact wording. This is a general recommendation. So what do we have so far for the motion so that we're clear? And then Dr. Grant, you first.
You know, I was just thinking of our own local area down here. If you're familiar with Julian, if you lived up in Julian and you said you had to have a veterinarian within 50 miles of practice, well, that probably limits you to maybe one or two. And what if you'd had a previous relationship and that practice doesn't want any part of you anymore because you're a difficult client or you didn't pay your bill or something, you know, putting a 50-mile thing, you know, becomes kind of, and I think whether people have we shouldn't be judging them on their financial thing, whether they can afford it or not afford it, but they may not want to go to that one practice too. So the 50-mile thing, I think, can become cumbersome.
Yeah, I thought about that in rural settings. It's really not as much as they have to go to that clinic. It's more, you know, having people who are talking to clients in an area that they have some familiarity with their veterinary options if they do need to refer them to a hospital, I think is the intent of what we're talking about here. And 50 miles may not be the right number. Maybe it's 100 miles, but it's more like we have to have some specifics of, oh, you have a local area, within the county, within the, I feel like there's, trying to give some idea, but the main, I think, concern is that we're going to have people that say you need to go see a vet, and they have no idea. They're like, well, just look online. And also, I think just not having a premise in California that they can associate with. I guess the other side of that is that there is that may negate some of the desires of what they're looking for in terms of providing care for people, and if there's a shortage of veterinarians in this one small area, having somebody that's associated with that area may not be helping anything either, so since there isn't anybody in that area. But anyway, Kathy, I don't know if you're clear on what our motion was. Jessica, it looks like you have something to add. I would appreciate any help here in trying to move this forward.
Actually, I think Tara can help with the motion.
Great.
Well, so the motion right now is opposed unless amended, and then we've got 3 items, but the first item is the most difficult, and we keep coming up with pros and cons to this requirement to have an association with a premises permit. And I'm hearing 50 miles, and then the intent of this provision is to be able to refer clients to a facility for in-person examination as necessary. I think most likely it's just going to have to right now be amended to resolve concerns. So let me flesh this out a little bit and we can clarify this particular piece. Resolve concerns with potential practice outside of California or at remote locations where clients are unable to seek in-person care. So it's just a amend to resolve concerns with practice outside veterinary practice, veterinary telemedicine practice outside of California or in remote locations.
Tara, I don't mean to interrupt. I'm not quite sure it's about remote locations, in locations far from the client, right? Isn't that what we were talking about?
Well, and who cares? What is the piece that's important about the animal care? So it's providing telemedicine to clients who don't have access to in-person veterinary care. That's what you're trying to resolve, but I don't know all the words, what are all the pieces that you're looking for?
Well, after talking about this, I almost feel like that is, it's just, there's so many different little nuances. If there is somebody in a remote location where there aren't veterinarians around, they wouldn't be able to have telemedicine if we made some change to this. And this is why we're there. One of the intents is to help people in remote locations where there isn't a veterinarian. So, I mean, it's possible that we just don't want to include this.
Yeah, maybe we don't. Maybe the key factor is they must have a premises in California. They can't be an Arkansas licensed vet in California, but in Arkansas. So somehow limiting these veterinary practitioners to someone with a practice, a premises in California, and perhaps we could say, and have the ability to provide the client with a list of potential in-person premises near them or something. Yeah, that's bad language, but you know what I
But
mean.
that's like what Dr. Solicito said.
That's
Yeah,
like what she said is a list,
and what
right? Yeah, some sort of
doctors have to do now.
Yeah, exactly.
But I don't know that having them have to have their own veterinary premise is all like that doesn't maybe a California address for their license.
I thought we were talking about also enforcement, disciplinary stuff. If somebody has a license, we were talking Helen Tuzio. She has a license and she's in California. She's an active practitioner in New York. The disciplinary problems with someone without a practice in California. I don't know.
Right, but I mean, you're not wanting to work at a hospital anymore, so you're doing telemedicine. Yeah.
So maybe we just have an item of concern for out-of-state veterinarians providing telemedicine to California consumers. That's just a concern with respect to enforcement. We don't know how to resolve that right now. We're just raising the concern. But the specific amendments that the board would like to see in the bill right now to remove its opposed position would be a robust, informed consent that outlines the limitations of telemedicine without an in-person exam, and to revise the definition of client and add a statement that the client can appoint an agent. Okay, so let me read this back. Oh, go ahead, Jessica. You're muted.
Sorry, I just wanted any clarification because I'm the one who starts drafting these. But so you would be the two requested amendments and then just a general concern regarding you said the out-of-state licensees practicing telemedicine for California clients or patients for enforcement reasons. And so that's where I'm confused because it's more of not necessarily enforcement, because we can enforce someone if they're licensed in California, we can enforce, but it's more of the ability for the client to go to a close location. So not necessarily out of state practicing in telemedicine in California. It's because in Dr. Nolan's example, it was Northern California difference, right?
It's for follow-up care. If it's required, right? Isn't that what?
Right, but not necessarily tied to enforcement concern. That's why I just want to make sure that that's what the concern would be.
Okay, I am looking up the Idaho thing because I felt like it had a pretty, oh gosh, I wish I could have found it. I'm sorry that I don't, where is it? By state, go to Idaho. Because it had a good language, Idaho Practice Act. It's not bringing me to it. Of course it's not. I wish that I had it in front of me and I feel really bad.
Can I just share the language in the Arizona bill? The provision is that the veterinarian is able to recommend a local veterinarian who can see the animal in person, so the client has the option to choose an in-person visit.
That's pretty simple. That's maybe, and it's up to the veterinarian, I suppose, to find somebody he can recommend, or she, that can take clients or will.
Yeah, because my thoughts are on, like, currently, general practitioners would be referring to specialty facilities that, just basically providing them the information. It's still up to the client to actually go and make those appointments and make that in-person, examination, happen.
So I'd like to refer everybody to the language in the bill. And right now, proposed Business and Professions Code, section 4826.6, subdivision C, establishes requirements for the veterinarian to inform the client. It's subdivision D. A veterinarian that practices veterinary medicine via telehealth shall do all of the following. Number 4, be able to refer the client to a veterinarian who may be able to see the patient in person upon the request of the client. Is this what we're looking for? Should this be bolstered in any way, better clarified, have an additional requirement?
Hi, everyone. I just got back on. I don't know if you can hear me, but I did find the language. I know that Tara said that this, I just came in on the tail end of that. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah, we can.
We can. Now we can't.
Now we cannot.
Oh boy, I'm back on. Okay. So in the Idaho legislation, it says association with a clinic. The consumer should be able to easily access in-person care if referred over. Oh, that was my talking point. Then it says a provider shall be familiar with and have access to available medical resources, including emergency resources, near the patient's location in order to make appropriate patient referrals when medically indicated. I thought that was pretty good language. So I don't know how you guys feel about that.
I like that language personally.
Okay, so would this be in place of the current requirement in the bill to be able to refer the client to a veterinarian who may be able to see the patient in person upon the request of the client? Or in addition to that?
I think it would be probably in addition to it, just clarifying that. Can you put that language up on the screen? The language of the bill up on the, I just can't see two things at once right now. I'm sorry. Is there a way to see the current language?
I can either share my screen, or Tim, if you're able to click on the bill and share your screen. I know that you're controlling the slide. Awesome. Thank you, Tim.
Okay. And I think it's at section 4826.6. D4.
There we go. Go back up a little bit.
There,
Right
be
there.
able to refer the client to a veterinarian who may be able to see the patient in person upon the request of the client. Yeah, I felt like that was just at least maybe in place of that. A provider
so
shall be
language again.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. A provider shall be familiar with and have access to available medical resources, including emergency resources, near the patient's location in order to make appropriate patient referrals when medically indicated.
I think that's much better. This language is very weak and wishy-washy that's in the bill right now. I think your language is more clear, or the Idaho language, wherever it came from.
Yeah, it's from Idaho.
All right, so let's see here to try to move this along a little.
Thank you.
Ms. Bowler's motion is to oppose unless amended to remove and replace BPC section 4826.6 subdivision D4 with the language that Ms. Bradbury just read, and I don't have all of that, but it's the Idaho language. Number 2, provide more robust informed consent, client consent, that outlines the limitations of telemedicine without an in-person exam. And number 3, revise the definition of client and add a statement, the client can appoint an agent.
Kathy? You're muted.
On the informed consent, would the way you drafted it, would the actual crafting of that language be left to this board after this bill is passed, or how would this, or they would want us to submit language and that would be embedded in the bill of the disclaimer or the informed consent? I'm just not sure how it would work.
I think you need the language, the specific language in the bill now. So perhaps the motion also includes delegating to the executive committee authority to negotiate amendments to the bill.
To craft an adequate informed consent. Is that what you meant? That sounds good to me. That's okay with the executive committee.
That would work. I hope I would be able to do that well enough to your guys' liking. Okay. Tara?
So, all right, so let's go back. Ms. Bowler's motion is move to oppose the bill unless amended to remove and replace Business and Professions Code section 4826.6 subdivision D4 with the Idaho language regarding the provider's familiarity with premises and having access to refer the client. Number 2, provide robust informed client consent that outlines the limitations of telemedicine without an in-person exam. Number 3, revise the definition of client and add a statement the client can appoint an agent, and delegate authority to the executive committee the ability to negotiate amendments to the bill. Dr. Grant, you supported Ms. Bowler's motion. Are you willing to second the motion?
Yes, I am. With a quick proviso, which may be informal, is that I believe that I need to, or someone needs to check with the California Horse Racing Board to see if there would be a misuse of this telemedicine veterinary client relationship with horse owners or trainers who may get somebody from out of state, or in state that's not a racetrack veterinarian to prescribe medications there for long periods of time, like Adequan or whatnot, where every horse gets a shot of Adequan every week.
Well, I guess I would say that the CHRB has the ability to review this bill and raise their own concerns with it. I mean, it's Vet Med can't represent any concerns CHRB might have, and it's not Vet Med's bill. So perhaps we can reach out to the executive director of the California Horse Racing Board to let them know this bill exists and that the Veterinary Medical Board has some concerns and will be working to resolve those concerns. And maybe then CHRB could separately reach out to the author's office if they have their concerns.
I have no problem with that at all. I think that's a very logical, pragmatic solution, and I do second the bill as you have written. Or the amendment, I'm sorry.
Okay. Great. So I think we can open that up to public comment now.
This is the moderator. The Q&A is now open. The instructions will be on the screen shortly. They're on the screen now. If you're logged in and would like to participate, click on the question mark inside of the square, type comment in the text field that appears, and make sure it goes to all panelists before you hit the send button. You can also raise your hand by accessing the hand icon from the bottom command row. Or if you're calling in, you can press *3 to raise your virtual hand. So I do have a few requests, or 2 requests. I'm Grant Miller from CVMA. I'm going to send a request to unmute your microphone. Give me just a moment. Request has been sent. I'll have the 2-minute timer, 50 seconds. Go ahead.
Hello, this is Grant Miller from the CVMA, and I appreciate all of the dialogue from the board today. Truly, this dialogue is reflective of the larger conversation within the veterinary community regarding this subject. And I feel like you're really right on with the concerns that you're presenting. While there are opportunities with telemedicine, and there may be some parts and areas within veterinary practice where it may be germane, there are clearly also some very serious possible ramifications for the public and the pets, and we need to look out for those. The CVMA has an opposed position on AB 1399, and I would encourage you to go to our website, cvma.net, and look in our legislative advocacy section under our 2023 update. We update that quite routinely, and that has a copy of our opposition letter that states our reasons for opposition, and then some additional talking points about our opposition to the bill. I will say that for the purposes of conversation today, I'd like the board to consider also creating a limitation on how many drugs can be dispensed through telemedicine. There's a dichotomy in the supporters of this bill. Some of the supporters, the main supporters of the bill, the sponsors of the bill, are the shelter community, but also there is a silent supporter of the bill, which is the Virtual Veterinary Care Association. That association is funded primarily by Dutch and Chewy, which are online platforms that are looking to distribute medications online. And if you look at some of the other bills in Arizona, Ohio, Florida, some of the other states that have looked at this, they have put limitations on the amount of drugs that can be dispensed, because we know that the #1 type of drug dispensed via telemedicine is antibiotics. So I'd like you to consider the possibility of not only linking this to
I muted. Next individual, Barbara Schmitz. I'm going to send a request to mute your microphone. Again, 2 minutes. You have a 15-second warning.
This is Barbara Schmitz. I'm here on behalf of the San Francisco SPCA. As has been mentioned during the discussion, Arizona did recently pass a law, literally days ago, authorizing veterinary telehealth. This bill would help modernize medicine for veterinary care. I just don't understand why this tool would not be used in the nation's technology capital. The same standard of care applies as for in-person health. This is, as has been mentioned during part of this discussion, this is just a tool that promotes the flexibility, allowing licensed vets, allowing animals and pet owners to be able to access the care or provide the care that is desperately needed here. The bill does not require any veterinarian to use this tool. It is just a tool to provide care. AB 1399 provides that authorization to allow licensed vets to use telemedicine. And there are lots of safeguards in the bill. I don't have time to go through those, but they're there. We feel that this helps to fill very significant gaps in vet care now in the furthest reaches of the state, to limited income individuals, to people whose vet is 90 miles away. Yes, I get those emails from folks in California. It allows access to people who have a hard time taking time off work to spend the entire day getting their animal to a vet, only to find out that Fido did not need to see a vet that day, or maybe he or she did. It helps people with transportation issues, homebound individuals, people with fractious animals. We are in a place right now where things cannot continue as they are. We really need this tool. There have been a lot of hypotheticals discussed today, and I appreciate all.
The 2 minutes were up. I muted. Next individual identified as calling user 6. I'm going to send a request to unmute your microphone. And just accept the request from your end. You are unmuted.
Thank you so much. This is Brittany Benessy with the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. I'd like to thank the board for your robust discussion today and for continuing your desire to remain at the table in discussions of AB 1399. We do believe that we have many appropriate guardrails in place and certainly believe and trust the veterinary profession to be one of integrity, and that we can trust our practitioners to make appropriate decisions regarding medications and the need for an in-person visit, and that if a veterinarian is uncomfortable using telehealth as a modality, they absolutely do not have to under this bill. However, we recognize the desire for additional language or guardrails and look forward to working with the executive committee on those recommendations. Thank you.
And lastly, we do have 2 comments that were entered into the Q&A, David Kirk, and I will read them off. The amendments you noted are very reasonable. If they are accepted into the bill, will you support, and should that be incorporated in the motion? A follow-up comment from David Kirk. I read, the motion says, quotations, reject unless, close quotation. I am asking if it should be, in quotations, accept if, quotation. There are no further requests. Would you like me to read the comment from the Q&A again?
I think that I think we're okay on the comment. Let me just close this here. Since I saw there was a lot of other attendees, we cut off 2 people. Maybe we can give everybody another 2 minutes just to finish their thoughts, and allow for any additional comments, since I was expecting like 20 people. So can you reopen it up and see if Dr. Grant and I'm sorry, the second speaker can finish their thoughts?
Yes, this is the moderator. The Q&A continues to be open. The instructions are on the screen. I do have a new member of the public who would like to make a comment. And for those who already spoke and would like to finish your comment, please raise your hand or enter your request in the Q&A, and I will send a request to unmute you again. So at this time,
just moderator for the new public member, if we can give them 4 minutes and the other people 2 more, just to be fair. Sorry. It's kind of.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for the clarification. So Richard Sullivan, I'm going to send a request to mute your microphone. You do have 4 minutes. Let me find, there you go. I sent a request to mute your microphone.
Thank you. I will not need to take 4 minutes. I think that the discussion has been fabulous. And the only point that I would like to emphasize is that some of the other states that are dealing with this, and particularly in Arizona, they do have a limitation on how long a prescription can be made before an in-person exam needs to be done. So again, I think that the shelter facilities do have the ability to follow up on cases where the treatment hasn't been successful and or the medication is not working or needs to be refilled for long-term care. I think anytime we're prescribing a dangerous drug, there are, for long-term use, there are definitely conditions that need to be considered, especially effects to liver and kidney function that can't be assessed visually. So I think there's good sound consumer protection and quality of medicine if there is a limitation of 7 to 10 days, in which if a medication is not being successful, that it can't be refilled, or if it's going to be for a long period of time, that animal needs to be monitored. In human medicine, during the pandemic, when my physician wanted to evaluate how my medication was working, he would send me to LabCorp to get a blood test. And when we had our virtual exam, he had that in front of him, so he could medically evaluate my situation. That infrastructure is not available in veterinary medicine. So I think we need to put some safeguards in to protect prescription writing for our consumers. Thank you.
This is the moderator. I do not see additional, I don't see any hands or any additional requests in the Q&A. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Sure, thank you. Okay, and then just to my comment, just thanks Dr. Sullivan for your comments. I guess I would just remind, say that the standard of care still is that they're still going to be held to the standard of care. I do like the Arizona language there, but veterinarians would still, if they were not properly monitoring medication, just like if it was from an in-person exam, and they didn't recommend blood tests on a long-term medication, if they were doing that through telemedicine, it would still be under the standard of care or not meeting the standard of care. So just in our Practice Act, we do have that already. Okay. Kathy, did you have any other thoughts after public comments, about the limiting the number of prescriptions, adding that we don't have to have specific?
Well, I thought that was a very good point. And I had always wondered, even things like carprofen and things like that that are often prescribed do have potential problems and potentially need blood work to see how they're going. So I thought that was a really good comment by Dr. Miller and Dr. Sullivan, just trying to figure out how we could add that, because I think for consumer protection and primarily for the animal protection, you're right about the standard of care, Dr. Bradbury, and I do trust veterinarians, but if it's a fully virtual VCPR, which this is potentially anticipating, I think a limitation on number of refills is possible. I wish we had language that was more clear. And I don't know if Dr. Miller, I guess Dr. Miller is off the call now, or he might have gotten back on and given us more language. So I don't know how to address that, but I think honestly, it's a very good point to try and add to as a potential requested amendment. I'm just not sure what the words are.
Jessica?
Maybe, and it could be like a maximum on a one refill, 14 days, like or 7 days, whatever Dr. Sullivan said. I just don't know.
Jessica?
Yeah, so I just want to provide kudos to Tara, because in her true Tara fashion, she actually looked up the Arizona bill and has the language. Since they sent it to us, and Tim is about to share it on a screen so you would be able to see what it says. And then I'll turn it over to Tara, and Tara can read it.
Okay, so this is the Arizona revised statutes, section 32-2240.02. This is veterinarian client-patient relationship through electronic means, consent, prescription, scope of practice. Subdivision B, capital B of that section is before you on the screen. It provides that how a veterinarian may prescribe drugs or medications after establishing a VCPR through electronic means. There's 1 through 4, there are limitations on the prescriptions. They can only be initially issued for not more than 30 days and may not be renewed for more than 30 days without an additional electronic exam or an in-person exam. Number 2, the veterinarian must notify the client that some prescription drugs or medications may be available at a pharmacy. And if requested, the veterinarian will submit a prescription to a pharmacy that the client chooses, a prescription renewed once and based only on electronic examinations may not be renewed again without an in-person exam. And the veterinarian may not order, prescribe, or make available a controlled substance. And we have our own definition under the Business and Professions Code. I think it's 4022. Unless the veterinarian has performed an in-person physical exam of the patient or made medically appropriate and timely visits to the premises where the patient is kept. I also want to note that getting back to my other concern about the federal VCPR requirement and that some medications, the off-label medications that federal law requires in-person VCPR. This Arizona law actually provides, could actually get at that concern. It limits, it states that before conducting an evaluation of the patient through electronic means, the veterinarian has to advise the client of several things. One, that the veterinarian may ultimately recommend an in-person visit. 2, some drugs or medications must be prescribed at an in-person visit. I think that would get at my federal VCPR concern. And number 3 is the appointment through electronic means may be terminated at any time. So it looks like, you know, we've got some better language for your consideration in this Arizona bill. I'm not exactly sure how much of this you would like to include or not include in your motion, Ms. Bowler. Perhaps you could include the requirement for the veterinarian to advise the client some drugs or medications must be prescribed at an in-person visit to clarify the federal law requirements. And then items 1 through 4 that you have in front of you, which are the limitations on prescriptions. That 30-day prescription is longer than what one of the public comments recommended. Dr. Sullivan had a discussion about limiting it to 7 to 10 days. So I just wanted to highlight that. But at the very least, these could be a model for adding a new requested amendment item to limit prescriptions with this language.
Excuse me, I like the language. I think I'd be interested in what the vets on the board think, but I think 14 days is more appropriate than 30. 30 seems a little long. A lot of stuff can happen in 30 days, but I'm not sure, and I'm not a vet. So, but I do like this additional language, and I think for consumer protection and for animal protection, while allowing the video the video consult, I think this is helpful language, and I think it would be good to do. The only question I have is the 30 days.
I think that, a lot of times I'll have patients come back in a month, depending on the condition, and have a call in, within a week or so to see how they're doing with certain drugs. But I'm an internist, so I have a lot of pretty complicated cases. But I don't think that, right now they have in the bill, it's a 6-month window. And I think that I think shortening it beyond what's in this language is probably not going to be well received, but we of course are not just trying to make things well received. We want to make them reasonable. I feel like a 30-day puts decent guardrails on it myself. The other thing I just wanted to say here is if we were going to try and adopt this language, we might want to add xylazine, make available a controlled substance as defined by whatever our section is, and xylazine, because I feel like if we don't have something about xylazine in here, it will be made a controlled substance, and that would be very bad for the equine practitioners and consumers and horses in the state. Xylazine is a very hot button issue right now. It's really first and foremost in our government's mind and concerns, and perhaps without even thinking about it, by having this bill adopted, regardless of the language of controlled substances, if xylazine isn't kept out of this, out of the ability for telehealth to prescribe it, we might lose xylazine as a non-controlled substance. So just another additional thought, because we need to talk more. Any other vets want to comment on Kathy's question? Dr. Grant.
I think that point you raised on the xylazine is very appropriate and timely right now too, Dr. Bradbury. And I'm not a small internal medicine person, but I think the 14-day limit would be would be a reasonable standard, because if we're worried about medications other than some ear medicine or dermatitis sort of things, if you're putting them on antibiotics and they haven't responded in 14 days, to go back to telemedicine, what are they going to do? Switch to purple penicillin rather than the orange penicillin? I mean, if you're making a diagnosis of coccidioidomycosis, you're not going to be doing that, I don't think, from a telemedicine standpoint. They need to, be able to chest x-ray or tap the abdomen or whatever to make a diagnosis for long-term use of antibiotics. So I would be in agreement more with the 14-day.
Dr. Solicito, do you have anything to add?
I think the 14-day is pretty reasonable, and I think by limiting, the days, it would serve another guardrail for us to make sure that the pets are being monitored, and the consumers are being protected from not, aggravating situations. Especially like, for example, as Dr. Grant had mentioned, like antibiotics, could potentially cause more problems, if given at a more extended period.
I'm all for 14 days. I just don't know that that's going to be an acceptable number for their purposes, but I think we want to give them what we think is correct. So I'm all for that. Dr. Grant?
Yeah, well, and what prevents the client from shopping? I mean, just going to another veterinarian for another telemedicine to renew another prescription when it runs out with the first veterinarian. Is there a safeguard against that?
I don't think so, but there isn't one in, there's no way that you can stop people from doing that in regular medicine either. So I don't know that we're going to solve that problem here, but it's another thing that can be abused for sure. So Kathy, did you want to amend your motion to add this to it?
I think, yes, I think so. So I mean, in terms of what Tara had, we had the robust disclaimer, the client definition, and then the limitations or the using this language, however we call this language, on medication. I don't know, Tara.
Yeah, with 14 days versus minus 30, and maybe the addition of xylazine for make available a controlled substance and xylazine.
I thought
okay,
the law doesn't permit controlled substances anyway from being prescribed via telemedicine. So would it already be covered or no?
Tara?
Yes, this bill would authorize, I mean, the key is the VCPR. To prescribe, you have to have a VCPR, right? And this bill would authorize the exam that is a piece of establishing the VCPR to be done electronically instead of in person. So this bill would allow a veterinarian to prescribe controlled substances. The separate issue was the federal law and off-brand prescriptions. If they're controlled substance or other dangerous drug, which requires a prescription, at this time, there's no limitation on prescribing xylazine. I'm very unclear as to what you're looking for with respect to calling out xylazine. I don't understand it. So we would need more clarity in that proposed amendment.
Because right now, even without any of this, the only limitation through this is on actual controlled substances in terms of prescribing in the way that it's written. My concern is that based on like what Dr. Grant mentioned and just in general, somebody could do a telemedicine appointment and perhaps divert xylazine more easily than it would be in person, and where somebody is able to, prove there's a problem with their animal, or they have an animal that needs sedation. And I doubt that actually would be an actual problem. My concern is a perceived issue within the government, and that pushing, that because right now there's a push to make it a controlled substance to prevent veterinary diversion of the drug, which is, there's no evidence is happening at all at the moment, but there's a push for that. So if all of a sudden we're making it easier to prescribe it and have it shipped from wherever, I'm concerned that that's going to lead to a more strong argument for scheduling it, and that would be really devastating to the equine practitioners and the equine patients, because of the lack of alternatives that are reasonably priced and effective and safe. So my idea of adding that language to it, that's just one drug that is singled out, and it's because of the current situation with the fentanyl crisis and xylazine being added to fentanyl. And even though it's clear it's coming from other places and not from veterinarians, that was my intent. Does that explain it a little better to you, Tara, or does that make it even more complicated?
I guess what I'm hearing is what you have before you on the screen is number 4. The veterinarian may not order, prescribe, or make available a controlled substance unless the veterinarian has performed an in-person physical exam. That would likely significantly reduce the number of prescriptions that could be made through telemedicine. that's significant, adding that to this bill, and may increase the likelihood of xylazine being added as a scheduled drug, because it would be limited in this VCPR bill. It would be swept up in that as long as it was a controlled substance, right?
Right. And so by adding the words prescribe or make available a controlled substance as defined in section 362501 and may not order or prescribe a controlled substance or xylazine, in that statement, because xylazine right now is not scheduled, and we really want to do everything we can to prevent it from being scheduled for veterinarians. But by making a specific limitation here, it would limit the ability of people to abuse this telehealth system and get xylazine this way. It is just so it's just a thought. And it's only because I know what the current climate is and what's happening regarding xylazine, and my concern that if we put this in there, which I think should go in there, or if we ask that to be put in there and they agree to put it in there, but it doesn't have a limitation on xylazine prescription, that it, I think that it would be helpful, but it may be too much. But I think what we need to do here, again, this is becoming very extended, but it is important. But I think we need to decide whether to add this language, Kathy, with, instead of 30 days, have it be 14 days, and whether you want to add the words and xylazine or just leave it as it is, and maybe the authors who are on the call can hear that and think about that, and then we would see if Dr. Grant likes those additions, and then we'd have to open it up to public comment again. So that's where we're at.
Okay, so let me explain where we're at. So Kathy, Ms. Buller, your motion may be opposed unless amended to, number one, remove and replace the language in BPC section 4826.6 subdivision D4 to include the Idaho language regarding provider referral. Number two, robust informed client consent that outlines limitations of telemedicine without an in-person exam. Number three, revise the definition of client and add a statement that the client can appoint an agent. And number four, include the prescription limitations in the Arizona bill, Arizona revised statute section 32-2240.02, subdivision B1 through 4, which is the language you have before you, but also revising paragraph number 1, changing 30 days to 14. And in number 4, adding xylazine after controlled substance, so that it would be both a limitation on prescribing controlled substances and xylazine unless the veterinarian has performed an in-person physical exam. So those are the 4 specific amendments to request, and delegate authority to the executive committee the ability to negotiate amendments to the bill.
I think you summed it up. And the other thing goes without saying is revising this language to remove all the Arizona sections that are cited in there. So we can't use the language verbatim, but.
So you,
Ms. Buller, is that your motion?
Yes, it is right now. And,
okay, and
like I say, cleaning up the language in the Arizona thing to remove their specific sections.
Right, we'll refer to the correct Business and Professions Code section for the controlled substance reference. Dr. Grant, do you accept this amended motion?
I do accept it.
Fantastic. Okay. I think we need to open it up to the public again, and we'll go ahead and just do the 4 minutes for them since we did that already once. Any comments from them?
Okay, this is the moderator. The Q&A is now open. The instructions are on the screen for reference. Members of the public, if you would like to participate, click the question mark inside of the square, type comment. Make sure it goes to all panelists before clicking the send button. You can also raise your hand by pressing the hand outline icon that's on the command row, which is the center of bottom of your window. And those who are calling in, you can press *3 from your phone to raise your virtual hand. Again, the instructions are on the screen. At this time, I do not see, I got one request. Grant Miller, I'm going to send a request to unmute your microphone. And just a moment as I locate your microphone. There you go.
Thank you. The CVMA still officially has an opposed position on this bill for several of the reasons that you had previously mentioned in your early conversation. However, we will also be looking very closely at some potential amendments and appreciate this board's introduction of these amendments. They are items that we have already discussed preliminarily amongst our own leadership, and we think that they are potentially a very good step towards putting up some adequate guardrails for consumer protection. I'd like to point out that while you can do belt and suspenders in limiting, in prohibiting controlled substance prescription via telemedicine, just know that our federal law already prohibits that in all healthcare professions. So even human medicine, they can't do that. So I think it's very fair to put it in our state law just to have the belt and suspenders, but we're already prohibited from doing that. Thank you.
This is the moderator. No further requests. Would you like me to close the Q&A?
Yes, thank you. Okay, I am not seeing any other hands up. And so I think we get to go to a vote.
Dr. Solacito?
Yes.
Ms. Bowler?
Aye.
Dr. Grant?
Aye.
Ms. Laredo?
Yes.
And Dr. Noland is absent. She had to leave. So we have Ms. Berber?
Yes.
Dr. Bradbury?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. I do appreciate the discussion, and I hope I didn't rush through that too much. I think, Jessica, can you take us through the next agenda item 5A2?
Yes. For SB 372, I added this to the agenda, members, because at the last board meeting, the board this is the bill that would require once individuals change their gender and their name, the board would have to remove any prior name from all of our websites, and there was a lot of discussion about what the bill as written at the time would have required, and there was concerns that really centered around the ability for consumers to be able to find disciplinary history against individuals if they only knew the former name, and implementation-wise, what it meant when we would have to reissue documents, and there were concerns that we would have to go back to prior official documents that had already been filed and go back and redact or alter official documents. The board ultimately did not take a position on the bill, but wanted to send a letter of concern and raise the concerns that were in the prior analysis and discussions during the board meeting. So after that, I started drafting the letter of concern and realized that the bill was pretty unclear on the intent of how they wanted this bill to be implemented. So I reached out to the author's office and had a meeting with them and discussed on how they see this bill being implemented and the intent behind it as well. And ultimately what they wanted is to make it that prior name less easily accessible. And so they were open to any kind of amendments they wanted the ability for consumers to still find those documents. They also didn't want to add in a huge administrative burden onto the board. And so essentially what it would look like is if someone were to go onto the license search, the license lookup, and type in a prior name, if that name had been changed, then instead of the new name populating or the prior name populating, it would just tell them that that individual is licensed and to contact the board for further information. And then that person would contact the board, ask for any publicly available information on that individual, and then the board would then provide if there's discipline on that individual or what their license information is. And so with that, I was also going to send that letter of concern to memorialize what the concerns were. However, after discussing with the author's office, it became apparent that there's a lot of other boards that were also reaching out with very similar concerns, and DCA had also sent in some proposed technical amendments to address some of the board's concerns, and it seems to be getting pretty unruly for the author's office to have all these different boards provide different amendments and concerns. And so what happened is the author's office requested that DCA hold a meeting with the board and to discuss the concerns and then come up with a general consensus of what edits could be made to remove the concerns from the board. And so with that, I provided an attachment to that document, to the materials that are posted. And those are reflected, those are from DCA's Ledge office, but they're reflective from a lot of the concerns that we all discussed with DCA. So I'll just summarize really quickly. The most significant change was that it narrowed the ability to make their prior name confidential to two scenarios. One, to only those associated with gender change under applicable code sections, or those who have changed their name based on domestic violence, stalking, sexual assault, or human trafficking, instead of applying to anyone who had a name change and request that their previous name not be posted. The language in the bill includes name changes for marriages, divorce, personal preference, or gender identity, so long as the licensee presents another government document that reflects the name change. Allowing for all name changes would be too much of a workload on the board. And so that was one of the changes. The other big change is there was a section in there that talked about a process in order to get public documents. And the concern there is that, one, it just says that the boards have to implement this process. There were talks about requiring the boards to have their separate phone line. And those were all things where really it already exists because of the PRA. So if someone calls the board and asks for public documents, we already required by law to provide within 10 days. So if they just left it to what the current PRA requirements are, then they already have that process. And there's no need or risk for the boards to implement 36 different ways. And so we thought that was a really good one. It also adds, notwithstanding any other law, to one of the sections, because how it's currently written, it would conflict with Business and Professions Code 27. Then it also gives flexibility on what the board is going to post. And so instead of requiring, if they look up the former name and then information would populate onto the website, what it will say is that the board shall instead post online a statement directing members of the public to contact the board for information about licensees or registrants prior to their prior enforcement action. And then it also deleted a subdivision that says the board doesn't have to modify certain records. So it's not required. It won't require them to modify the already the already taken action. So I think with all of these proposed amendments, I think it already addresses a lot of the board's concerns. And so the board, like I said, they don't have a position on the bill, so you can remain with no position, or you can take a support position or opposed position, or if you want to do a support, you can do a support and then suggest these amendments. It's up to the board of what you want to do. But I do think that these amendments would address the concerns that were raised at the prior meeting.
Okay. Yes, Kathy.
Jessica, it sounds, because this is more complicated, I'm sure, than this author anticipated when she first came up with the idea. And I understand there's a couple of exceptions in terms of gender change, domestic violence, things like that make a total sense to me. But it sounds like there's still going to be a lot of movement on this bill description. I mean, you know, with everybody weighing in and no matter. So I'm just wondering if it's appropriate for us to take a position now, given the fluid dynamics of this bill and how it could go. I don't know. I'm just asking you. It sounds like everybody's weighing in and there's a lot of complicated issues here.
So it's up to the board whether or not you want to take a position and when. I do think that DC is going to provide this language to the author's office as a recommendation of how this might address a lot of the concerns that they've heard. And so if the board agrees with these amendments, we could provide that to them with either take a formal position that I support it if amended, or you can maintain the watch position and then recommend that these are sent to the author's office to address prior concerns.
You're muted.
Dr. Bradbury, you're muted, yeah.
Sorry. I would like to make a motion to continue to watch and present these amendments to the author's office. Dr. Grant?
I second.
Okay, great. I don't see any other hands up. Can we open this up for public comment?
This is the moderator. The Q&A is now open. The instructions are on the screen for your reference. Member of the public, if you would like to participate, click that question mark inside of the square, typically bottom right corner of your WebEx screen, and type the word comment in the text field and hit send to all panelists. You can also raise your hand by clicking on the outline of a hand, the icon that's typically located bottom center of your WebEx webinar window. If you're calling in, press *3 to raise your virtual hand. At this time, I see no request for public comment. Would you like me to close the Q&A?
Yes, please. Sorry. Okay, so I think I don't see any other hands. Should we call for a vote?
Dr. Salcedo?
Yes.
Ms. Bowler?
Aye.
Dr. Grant?
Yes.
Ms. Laredo?
Yes.
Ms. Berber?
Yes.
Dr. Bradbury?
Yes.
All right, motion carries. Really quickly, SB 373, as you recall, members, this was a bill to prohibit certain boards from providing the full address of record and on their website, and instead it would be replaced with the city, state, county, and zip code of those licensees. And right now it's specific to a couple boards. And the concern from the sponsors was more of a safety concern for their licensees. And when this was raised and we mentioned it to CVMA as well, CVMA has since requested that the Veterinary Medical Board be included into the bill. And it's my understanding from the author's office that they are willing to include the Veterinary Medical Board in the bill, but they wanted some assurances from the board that they wouldn't oppose the bill if this were to occur or raise concerns. So they're not asking for a formal position on the bill. They just wanted to run this by the board to make sure that this wouldn't cause any issues. So with that, I'll turn it over to the board.
I don't think this would cause any issues in my mind. Does anyone on the board have any questions or concerns? I am not seeing any hand. Oh, yes, Kathy.
Well, I was just going to say, I totally agree. I don't see any concerns that we would have either. Do we want to, and it sounds like they're adding veterinarian licensees into this bill, or they're proposed to adding them into the bill as anyway, but do we want to make a statement that we are requesting that they be added in? Or Jessica, is that sort of a done deal anyway?
That's up to the board if you want to request it. I think that the author's office is just looking for assurances that we wouldn't oppose it. So I think as long as we're not going to come out and oppose it or have concerns to be raised, I think they're able to add it in.
Okay. I don't see anybody else. Oh, Dr. Grant.
Yeah, I move that we include the Veterinary Medical Board on this bill number, whatever it is.
Okay, so to get clarification, it sounds like you are requesting an amendment to the bill. So if you would like to request to send amendments, you could do that by similar to, you can do a watch and then do a letter just requesting that amendments be made. You can do a support if amended position and provide the amendments, or you could do the oppose unless amended and provide amendments. So which one would you like to do?
I think the amendment, to put an amendment in there that we're in favor of being included on the bill.
Sounds like a support if amended.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I'll second that.
And that's to include veterinary licensees, is that, yeah, or licensees with the veterinary board, or however it would be referred.
Yeah, it would include the veterinary medical board in that.
Okay, I don't see any other hands on the board. We can open this up for public comment, please.
The Q&A is now open. Instructions will be on the screen shortly. If you would like to participate, click that question mark, type comments sent to all panelists, or click on the hand outline. Or if you're calling in, press *3 to raise your virtual hand. No requests have been submitted. Would you like me to close the Q&A feature?
Yes, please. And let's go ahead and take a vote.
Dr. Solicito?
Yes.
Ms. Bullard?
Aye.
Dr. Grant?
Yes.
Ms. Laredo?
Yes.
Ms. Berber?
Yes.
Dr. Bradbury?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, great. So let's move on to our final agenda item 5.4. Jessica, do you mind going over that?
Sure. So this is SB 669. This also touches our VCPR, and it allows RVTs to act as an agent under certain circumstances. As you recall, members, in April, the board approved an opposed unless amended position. This one had specific requests. So we wanted the amendments to resolve the board's concerns, including insertions for establishing the VCPR, subdivision, and provided the sections, adding the new subdivisions, and then the treatment of viruses and bacteria, and asked the executive committee to work with the sponsors in the author's office to address the concerns. The subcommittee did meet with, and Tara met with the sponsors of the bill in late April. I'm sorry, no, in May, on May 16th, to discuss the concerns. We also discussed some proposed amendments from stakeholders, which is also provided in the packet. And those suggested amendments from the stakeholders were something that the author's office wanted some input on from the board. And I think that the main concern that remains for the sponsors, as far as including the the proposed amendments was specific to the requirement for the veterinarian to review the documentation. So it sounds like they're still pretty hesitant to provide that. They also provided a letter to the board, which is also in the packet, that goes over why they're concerned with that requirement. So with that, I'll turn it over to the executive committee.
Okay, so we had a meeting with these authors, and again, I want to thank them for their willingness to just discuss it and work with us to try and come to common ground. I think the part that we had what I had the most issue with is really just that we spent a lot of time hashing the regulations out so that we felt that to a point where we felt comfortable with this. This is such a big a big jump. It's expanding the scope of care. It's changing the VCPR. It's for allowing RVTs to really start acting in a very different role. We obviously understand the intent of this, given the fact that we were supportive of it and we passed the regulations. My concern was that now it was being changed sort of without that deep dive and discussion and thoughts that went into our original regulations. And so in regards to the veterinarian reviewing the documentation, I do see the author's point that they're making, that this sort of limits the usefulness of the bill in that it still requires a veterinarian to be sort of engaged in this whole process. But I think that was part of why we felt okay and moving forward with it in the first place. So I see their side of it. My concern with completely removing that is that this is a statute. So once that's gone, I mean, it really is. Again, guardrails are not in place there, and certainly, things could be addressed later if this was not in regulations, if this was not working the way that it was intended, having the veterinarian be directly involved. So I guess I'm still concerned with removing that safeguard. So those are my thoughts. Dr. Solicito, what was your takeaways from this?
Thank you, Dr. Bradbury. I would say I echo the same concerns. In as much as I fully support the intent of this bill, I am also concerned of how it's going to be implemented. And I think, maybe a further discussion and definitions of what those boundaries are. Because I feel like this is empowering, the RVTs, which is great. We rely so much on our RVTs. And I think they're very much capable of making decision, but ultimately the care for the pet and diagnosis, is something that can be a very slippery slope. So I think we need to make sure that we're putting specific, measures to ensure that the bill does not open a path that can be detrimental to pet care, for consumers.
Yeah, and I think it would be an unintended path, and I think one of the things that I've learned from being on this board is that there's a lot of unintended consequences of various language and laws and regulations that I often have not thought about until there has been a robust discussion and look at it from people from all different viewpoints, which I've really appreciated as part of the process here. And that is my concern is the author was brought onto this bill very sort of last minute. And again, I think their intent is fantastic. I think, you know, what they want to do and their goals and trying to get this enacted is all fully above board. I also kind of just to clarify to the public, there was some information put out there that there was a discussion and that the board had certain opinions. It was the board hasn't had a chance to talk about it. That's what we're doing today. It was the executive committee talking to the author's office, and it was we were trying to get more information and everything. But today is really what the board's opinion is. The language and the concerns mostly were raised by CVMA about removing that the veterinarians review of things. So I wanted to clarify that. But in any case, I think the authors of the bill had came into this sort of late, and they also just maybe aren't aware of the long-term ramifications of what's happening. I know that I may not be fully aware of the long-term ramifications of changing the scope of RVTs, but it was, again, very well thought out before and many meetings prior to the MDC meeting and the board meeting in January, where we finally came up with those regulations. So I was hopeful that we could just have those, the way that we discussed those, put into this statute. So, or in this legislation. So that's my final little thoughts there. Let's see, we have Tara and Dr. Grant. I didn't pay attention to who is first. Let's have Tara first and then Dr. Grant.
Okay, so I'm just making a clarifying statement for the record. The issue is that in January 2023, the board reviewed and approved a regulatory proposal on the same issue. The missing piece here that we're kind of concerned about is in that regulatory proposal, it would have added to CCR Title 16, Section 2032.1, subsection E5, a requirement that prior to prescribing or dispensing vaccines or medications, the supervisor, which is the veterinarian, shall review the documentation required pursuant to subparagraph G of paragraph 2. The issue here is that only veterinarians can prescribe drugs, medications, and treatments under California law. And that is specifically referenced in Business and Professions Code section 4826, subdivision B, section 4840.2, and CCR Title 16, section 2036, subsection A3. RVTs do have authority for emergency provision of medications, but the issue for non-emergencies at this point is that this bill is not contemplating that an RVT, by examining and administering medications, is skipping and missing that veterinarian prescription of the treatment. And that's really a big concern, and how we were trying to work through that issue of the prescription by the veterinarian was requiring the veterinarian to review the documentation before those medications were being administered. Thank you.
Thank you. That's helpful. Dr. Grant.
Yeah, I had a couple points of clarification. Would this bill, the way it's currently written, would that prohibit a equine practitioner who goes to a large stable to vaccinate and worm, 80 or 90 horses and has a registered veterinary technician to assist them, or go down one side of the barn while they go down the other and do it, and then they're counting on the the veterinary technician to pick up on horses that are salivating a lot. Like maybe they got vesicular stomatitis. They're going hopefully going to let the other veterinary know. But as I read it, they have to be in the same premise, veterinary premise. Wouldn't be in a stable area. Is that correct, Tara? I don't know. The other thing is, you know, it says anticipated internal or parasites. I think that should be external parasites. Those are the only two things. I don't have a problem with RVTs doing that.
Tara, do you have it?
Doesn't have to be a veterinary premise. You know, large stable horses is not usually a veterinary premise.
So under existing law, a veterinarian is supervising an RVT in the provision and administration of medications, and they can do that under indirect supervision. And the definition of that is the animal has been examined by the veterinarian. That's it. That's the requirement. That the veterinarian is the one who's establishing the VCPR through the examination of the animal or medically appropriate visits. They're familiar with the particular animal before medication is being administered by the RVT. This bill does something very different in that it authorizes an RVT to stand in the shoes of the veterinarian for purposes of creating that VCPR. And then it authorizes the RVT to administer treatment. So it doesn't affect how veterinarians are currently supervising on site. It's not just at a veterinary premises. Out in the field, the veterinarian is present. This bill, I guess, could authorize an RVT to administer vaccinations to equines with no veterinarian present. And under the current terms of the bill, the veterinarian who's supervising supposedly would just have to be available by phone. And that would create the VCPR between the client and the RVT standing in the shoes of the veterinarian. So in terms of a normal situation where the veterinarian is present and examines the patient, the veterinarian then walks away and is somewhere on site while the RVT is administering medications. That's not going to be affected by this bill. It's really in terms of the veterinarian is not on site at all, not examining the equine patient, and the RVT is performing the exam, documenting, and then administering medications without really any veterinarian involvement.
Well, I firmly believe the veterinarian's got to be on site, even a large stable. They can't be down the road.
Yeah, the bill is that they had added by telephone. Kathy.
I just want to confirm that they took out in the amendments the antimicrobial, I mean, all the other abilities. They just left in parasite control and vaccines, right?
Yes, and they added by telephone.
Right. So would it be appropriate to have a motion? We have a motion to oppose unless amended, and they've changed some of the issues that we had. Would it be appropriate to continue a motion to oppose unless amended and what do you call it? Address this concern about what they've done in terms of opening it up? I'm not sure the words to use, but you know, we still have a problem with it in this regard, let's say, if that's what the board will is, and then define that once again. It sounds like you've already talked to the authors about this and they did not make changes, but But
Correct.
as far as
Yeah,
putting the board on record, it seems to me these are significant. This is a significant issue as still.
yeah, and I don't think they will change it, but that's that's I think reasonable. Jessica?
Yeah, so you can do an oppose unless amended and propose whatever amendments you want. If you'd like the amendments that are included in your packet, you'd want to include those in the amendments. And then also an amendment to remove the ability for them to provide the veterinarian to supervise by being available by telephone.
Do you want me to make a motion, Dr. Bradbury, that we could just work with and then keep the discussion going, or whatever you want?
Yeah, the telephone thing is these days, I mean, you could be on vacation in the Bahamas and someone calls up and say, hey, I went down the row and there's horses showing signs of anaphylaxis. What am I going to do?
It does say if and easily available, but I agree with your concerns. So is there the language? I know you have it in the packet. I'm sorry, I'm going between screens. The language, Jessica.
Is it on page 18?
I'm looking.
Is it on page 18 in the packet?
Well, that's where the
language, it looks like potential amendment language.
Yeah. Jessica, can you help us out?
Yeah, I actually just saw Tara pop up her video. So Tara, if you're able to help with the motion that would cover the amendments that are being considered from the packet, and then also to remove the telephone reference.
So yeah, I think we're looking at page 18 of the meeting materials. This is agenda item 5, attachment 4. These amendments if working at a location other than a registered veterinary premises, would authorize an RVT to establish a VCPR in the general, while the veterinarian is in the general vicinity or available by phone and is quick and easily available. I think you've raised concerns about that available by phone piece, and the motion appears to be oppose unless amended to strike in Business and Professions Code section 4826.7 subdivision B, paragraph 2, the text available by phone or available by phone. And then on page 20 of the meeting materials, new subdivision C does include, prior to prescribing or dispensing the preventative vaccines, medications, the veterinarian shall review the documentation required pursuant to, and I think these paragraph references are incorrect. That could just, that's just a minor technical correction right there.
Sarah, I just want to clarify, the amendments that you're seeing are not what's currently in the bill.
That's right.
So it wouldn't be strike, it would be approving these amendments, but removing the reference to telephone.
Right.
Okay, so yeah, approving without the reference or available by telephone in subsection B2, subdivision B2.
And that would, I think, be my motion. I just do have a question. When it says shall review the documentation required, what is that in practical purposes? Just the little check-in, The, sort of the whatever age, weight, whatever temperature, all the rest of the patient involved. Okay.
All right. Do we have I'll second that.
So because you've got these amendments, how do you want to structure this? Oppose unless these amendments in the packet are included in the bill without reference to or available by telephone?
Yeah, I think it would be opposed unless amended, and the amendments would be the amendments presented today with the removal of the reference by telephone.
Couldn't you say oppose unless amended as follows, and then just rewrite these amendments without the phone?
About oppose unless amended as reflected in the amendments included in the meeting materials. I mean, we need to reference this stuff like with words in the meeting minutes.
I mean, you just did, I think, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so oppose unless amended as reflected in the amendments included in the meeting materials on pages 18 through 20, but without the reference to quote available or available by telephone in subdivision B2.
Okay. I know there's more comments. We have a little bit of an issue. We have 2 people who need to leave at 1 o'clock, and we have the public who needs to comment. We won't have a quorum after 1 o'clock. So unless it's something really urgent, Kathy or Dr. Grant, you have your hand up. I want to go ahead and because I seconded that, move to public comment. Is that okay? Okay, everybody's hand is down. Okay, moderator, we're going to limit the comments to 2 minutes. And can you open it up to public comment, please?
Yes, this is the moderator. The Q&A is now open. The instructions are on screen for your reference. Members of the public, if you would like to participate, you can raise your hand by clicking on the outline of a hand, which is typically on the command row, bottom center of your WebEx webinar screen, or you can click on the question mark, type comment in the text field, and send it to all panelists. Those who are calling in, you can press *3. So we're going to limit it to 2 minutes. I'm going to provide a 15-second warning. We'll go with Nancy Erlich, and I apologize if I pronounced your last name. I'm going to send a request to unmute your microphone. You're unmuted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, my comment is about the section that says prior to the examination, blah, blah, blah. The RVT discloses orally in writing to the client that the RVT is acting as an agent of the veterinarian, blah, blah, blah. And after that, the RVT is supposed to obtain oral or written authorization from the client to proceed. And personally, as an RVT, I find this section to be extremely offensive. I performed this service 30 years ago. We called them tech facts, and the clients chose whether they wanted to see the technician or the veterinarian. And as you're probably aware, as of January 1st this year, all RVTs are required to wear name tags with their license number on it, so that I would presume that the client is choosing to be seen by the RVT, so they know it's an RVT. The person is wearing a name tag with their license number on it. And I have never walked into a doctor's office and had a nurse tell me she's working for the doctor and this is her license number, this is his license number. And I don't see the necessity of this. It's really very offensive to RVTs. And I also think having this oral and written authorization by the client is unnecessary. The client should be choosing to be seeing the RVT, therefore they know they're seeing an RVT, and it's not necessary to do all this extra paperwork. So that would be my statement, and I hope that you seriously consider this, because it really, and not every RVT is going to want to do this, and not every veterinarian is going to allow every RVT to do this. So it's up to the veterinarian to decide which RVTs in their practice are qualified.
Next individual identified as Grant Miller, CVMA. I'm going to send a request to unmute your microphone.
Hi, thank you. I'd like the board to reconsider the telephone, available by telephone requirement. That was an ask from the shelter community, and we're very grateful to CAWA, San Diego Humane, and SFSPCA for only asking for that amendment. They could have really put a serious dent in this bill, and I think that they recognize, just like the rest of us do, that there's a really good spirit behind this bill and there's a good intent, and all they wanted was for telephone availability. For the veterinarians on the board, when an animal receives a vaccine, about the only thing that can go wrong is anaphylaxis. In the case of anaphylaxis, having a veterinarian in the general vicinity is really useless. In fact, even having them on the phone is really useless. You have to know exactly what to do very quickly in that regard. So RVTs under 2069, under CCR 16, section 2069, have the ability to act in an emergency. And if you look at the tasks that they can do, those tasks are largely commensurate with treating anaphylaxis. So we know that they have the training and education to do it. Personally, I'm sorry, not personally, the CVMA discussed this and recognized that whether the vet's in the general vicinity or whether the vet's available by phone, it's going to be up to the RVT to act immediately if there is anaphylaxis. Given that it is exceedingly rare to have an anaphylactic reaction to a vaccine, we felt that it was an acceptable risk to accept the available by telephone request from the shelter community, and that essentially removed their opposition to the bill. So I'd like you to please consider that, because we'd like to see this bill move forward. Thank you.
Individual identified as Barbara Schmitz. I'm going to send a request to mute your microphone.
Good morning. This is Barbara Schmitz. I have a request, and that is whether I can have 4 minutes to speak, please, because I have comments on behalf of my organization, the San Francisco. But I was also requested from the Sacramento SPCA to make a few comments in addition. If anybody is willing to bear with me, I'm maybe 3 minutes with you.
Jessica, I'm sorry, just one moment. Jessica, I know that we have to allow everybody the same amount of time for this topic. So we really are on a time limitation, and I apologize, but we need you to try and summarize things in 2 minutes. We just don't have 4 minutes for everybody to talk who wants to talk on this topic.
Okay, then on behalf of the San Francisco SPCA, I just want to echo what Grant Miller has just conveyed to you all. We really strenuously urge you not to ask for removal of the or by telephone. It's really critical language in having this bill actually work the way that the sheltering community needs it to work and the way that the community needs it to work. The Sacramento SPCA is not able to be on the call today. That's why I'm speaking on their behalf. And it relates to Business and Professions Code 48.26.7, subsection C, allowing RVTs to administer the vaccines, for example, at vaccine clinics, is a significant help in providing preventative care to animals. The vaccine clinics are an excellent tool to help prevent disease and disease outbreaks that are costly and devastating. And the language that you're suggesting in subsection C, that, reviewing the records, it would actually undercut the aims of this bill. So on their behalf, I am respectfully urging you to please drop that request. we feel that there are guardrails in place because this is all being done under the authority of the vet. Thank you.
This is the moderator, Jamie Larson. I'm going to send a request to mute your microphone.
Thank you, and thank you, Barbara, for that. I was able to make it today. So, and thank you to the board for the opportunity to share my thoughts today as well. So my name is Jamie Larson. I'm the Director of Animal Services at the Sacramento SPCA and a proud registered veterinary technician with over 22 years of experience in small animal private practice, RVT education, and now animal sheltering and welfare with an emphasis on keeping pets healthy and in their homes with the people who love them. Access to care is affecting all of our communities, including private practice, veterinary clinics, hospitals, and shelters alike. Increasing access to the most basic yet arguably the most essential care by keeping both animals and people protected against highly contagious diseases and parasites should be everyone's #1 priority. The ability to do this while freeing up veterinarians to dedicate their time to more advanced care, including surgeries, treatments of medical conditions, interpreting diagnostics, and so much more is essential. Amendments requiring the veterinarian to review the record and approve the care without actually seeing the patient does nothing to increase care for the patient and is basically a technicality that distracts the veterinarian from other essential duties that only they can perform. I respectfully remind the board that burnout is a real cause caused by the feeling that one must be everywhere all at once and they are the only ones that can perform a task. Right now, that is the truth for veterinarians in California and across the nation, which is why more vets are leaving the field than ever before. We can remove some of this demand by allowing veterinarians the choice to use their highly trained RVTs to perform tasks well within their training and experience, to reduce the burden on veterinarians, expand access to veterinary care, and improve the lives of pets and their people. Again, we ask the Veterinary Medical Board to support SB 669 as written, to bring relief to our veterinarians and increase access to the essential care to keep our pets and
up. No more requests. Would you like me to close the Q&A?
Yes, please. Okay. After public comment, yes, Kathy.
I think after hearing that, and it's always so helpful, which is why our boards in California are so great because of the public participation. I would be amenable to amending the motion to oppose without, I should say oppose unless amended, with the amendments as proposed here on pages 18 to 20, and not removing the or available by telephone. I understand the concerns, but now that I think about the shelters that don't have a vet on, vet present all the time, and after what we heard in public comment, that seems to be practical.
I agree with that, and I was the one that seconded it, so I'm okay with that change.
With that, we'll have to that's the new motion. The board can discuss it, and we would have to reopen it up for public comment.
Christina, you're muted.
I don't see any hands. Thank you. Let's go ahead and open that back up to public comment.
It's open. Instructions are on the screen. If you would like to participate, click that question mark, type comment, send to all panelists, or press on the icon of a hand to raise your hand. Calling in, you can press *3. I have 2 requests. I'm going to send a mute to Barbara Schmidt. You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, this is Barbara Schmitz on behalf of the San Francisco SPCA. Thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And we're hoping that motion will carry. It's not clear to me whether or not the record language is going to remain in the amendments that you all are seeking. And so I just some of the concerns I had shared previously. The concerns that I shared on behalf of Sacramento SPCA also are shared by my organization, San Francisco SPCA. So hoping to, have that additional change as well. Thank you.
Next individual, Nancy Ehrlich. I'm going to send a request to mute your microphone.
I have to, in addition to my previous comments, I'd have to also agree that requiring the veterinarian to review the documentation presents the same problem as requiring a veterinarian to be in the general vicinity and not by telephone. If the veterinarian is available by telephone, they can't very well review the documentation. And so I would urge you to remove that recommendation, as well as my additional points earlier about the offensive nature of requiring RVTs to identify the supervising veterinarian.
There are no further requests. Would you like me to close the Q&A?
Yes, please. Okay, I don't see any other hands up. Let's take a vote.
Dr. Solcito?
It's a yes.
Ms. Bullard?
Aye.
Dr. Grant?
Aye.
Ms. Laredo?
No.
Ms. Ferber?
Aye.
Dr. Bradbury?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, we did it. And I believe that is, the end of our agenda. So thank you, everyone. Oh, Kathy?
Oops, I just wanted to say a point of personal preference and personal whatever, and I know probably Jennifer believes it too, but as this is probably our very last veterinary board meeting, and it's been an honor to serve on this board with you all and the previous members, and thank you very much for the opportunity.
I echo everything Kathy said. Thank you, everyone.
And I apologize for not mentioning that and thanking, I think no, it's just at the end here, we were like, oh, up against this time. And you guys have just been amazing and done so much additional work, and really, I've learned so much from you both. And I really appreciate all of your hard work and your dedication. So thank you. Oh. Okay, bye everyone.
We made it, 1 o'clock.